The time is 12:57, and we're going to pick up with agenda item number 13, which is Physical Therapy Student Question and Answer Forum. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank the students and the faculty and the institution for having us and for all of you being here today. And we are open to any questions that you might have that you are curious about with the board. Anything specific that you might want to ask to any of us. So if you would like to come forward and get the microphone and introduce yourself and ask your question, or we could pass the microphone around to each student, either way.
Alicia, should we do introductions for us too so they know who
Good
we are
idea.
and what our role is?
Good idea. You want to start?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katarina. I'm a public member on the board, so I'm a non-PT. I was appointed by the governor for 2 terms and really enjoying serving the great state of California. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Drummer. I'm a physical therapist. I work at San Francisco General Hospital in San Francisco. This is my 6th year, the start of my 6th year on the board, so my 2nd term. Each term is 4 years. And it's been a very interesting adventure. So looking forward to your guys' questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya McMillan, and I am a public member also. I'm not a physical therapist, but I really applaud you guys for the work that you do and choosing this profession. I've learned so much about what you guys do, what we do as a board, and so I'm glad that you guys are here with us today.
My turn.
Good afternoon again. Thank you for coming and sharing some time with us. My name is Jesus Dominguez. My day job, I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern California, PT school. I'm also a physical therapist. Like Dr. Drummer, I think this is our 6th year on the board, so we were appointed for a first term and then reappointed by the governor for a 2nd term. And yeah, I've very much enjoyed being a part of this board as a member. Learned quite a bit about my profession from the clinical perspective. So thank you.
Let me add, I forgot to say, this is my 1st term, and I was appointed by the Senate Rules Committee.
Hi, I'm Alicia Rabina Amon, and I'm also a physical therapist appointed by Governor Brown. This is my 2nd term. And I do work for University of the Pacific and also still treat patients in the home health setting and the acute care setting. And being a board member has really opened my eyes and not just allowed me to wear the hat of a physical therapist, but also as someone who's looking out for the interest of consumers and the public, and also paying attention to students in programs such as yourself. Yeah. And we have 2 vacant positions right now, 1 public member vacancy and 1 physical therapist vacancy on the board. So we're looking forward to having those seats filled soon. Yeah. So who would like to start with a question? Well, first of all, I'd like to have Mr. Kaiser introduce himself as well.
I'm Jason Kaiser. I'm the executive officer for the board, the administrator of the program, basically. I'm not a physical therapist. My background is in law enforcement. I've been with the board from an entry-level position in 2009 and the EO since 2012.
Yes. And
I'm Michael Knotes. I'm not a member of the board. I am the board's legal counsel, and I'm actually an employee of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I'm here mainly as a resource and to assist the board with Open Meetings Act requirements, but also just any legal concerns that they have.
thank you. And let's have Brooke introduce herself.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Brooke Arneson. I work for the board and for Jason Kaiser. I'm the regulatory and legislative analyst for the board.
Thank you. And I think we had a volunteer who wanted to go first. Yeah.
You can.
Yeah. And please tell us your name and maybe what year you are.
Okay. So my name is Tyler Bouchard. I'm a student PTA.
Is your mic turned on?
Years.
I might have turned it off for closed session.
Is it on now?
Someone grab. Can you pick him up on the boom?
Can you pull it? No.
No?
Oh, I can pick him up here.
Okay.
All right.
Just speak loudly while we switch the batteries out on the mic.
Oh, well, my name is Tyler Bouchard. I'm a student PTA. This is my second year. And I just had a question for the public members, or the ones that were not, licensed under a PT. What made you actually interested in wanting to become part of the PTBC?
So it's very interesting how I became a part of this. I actually did not choose this board. I didn't know pretty much anything about the boards or commissions or any of that. I'm an advocate. I'm a child care provider, and I've been an advocate for children and families for like the last 10 years and a part of labor. And I got phone calls from folks saying, hey, the pro tem just appointed you to a board. I was like, okay. And then they reached out to me and it was explained to me, and I am so happy that he did that. And I love working with this board and learning so very, very much about physical therapy. And I actually was just telling Dr. Drummer that I had a tumor removed from my leg, and I looked forward to my physical therapy sessions because the two therapists who work with me were incredible, and thank God for them. I don't have full flexibility in my leg, but they really brought me a long, painful way. And I really appreciate it. So that's how I ended up here.
But Tanya, at that point, you had worked with the Senate Pro Tem quite a bit on different things.
Yes.
And that's how you kind of got volunteered.
He got to know me exactly. Yeah, got to know me and know my personality. And I do, like I said, I have a huge labor background. So I'm also with SEIU Local 99. I'm the treasurer for my union. So.
So my journey to the PT board is also in the voluntold department. I come from the nonprofit sector, and I worked for an organization that helped train African American professionals to serve on a wide range of governing boards, including commissions. And so the governor's appointment secretary flew down to do a workshop for my alumni, and she encouraged me to apply. And at the time, I was only like 23 or 24, and I thought she was joking. Like, what am I going to do on a board or commission? She was like, no, really, we're looking to diversify our boards, and you would make an amazing public member. So the governor's appointment secretary tells you to apply, you just apply. And so she offered me a position on the board. My only experience is as a recipient of physical therapy. I have scoliosis, and so I've been using PT since I was in middle school. And so I had a really good experience with my PTs, and I was like, sure, why not? Let's go for it. And I've enjoyed every moment since.
Very cool. And so have we.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Of course.
Yeah, just pass the mic around. We're going to make each and every one of you ask a question.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Luan Pham. I'm also a second year like Tyler. So I wanted more clarification on like what this meeting was about and like what kind of topics you guys discuss. If we are allowed to go into specifics about that, that would be, I think, would be really interesting for you guys to tell us.
So the interesting part about today is this is the first time that we've actually agendized a Q&A with students, right? So we have an agenda of business for every board meeting that we attend, and it can be review of legislative language, review of regulatory language that the board is proposing, topics of interest, training modules, those kind of things. It's been an interest of this board to make sure that we have a stronger outreach presence, because what I like to say is students and even our own licensing population sometimes don't have a real good understanding of what the Physical Therapy Board of California is, does, or if we even exist. So because of that, we've actually, and thanks to Carrington and their willingness to do it, we've actually agendized it as an item. We want to be able to have our board meetings at educational programs for that kind of outreach so that they can see. The question that you asked is like, what kind of business are we talking about today? So there's an agenda in the back, and we'll give you a copy of it, but the topics on the agenda today that are of interest are what kind of legislation is coming out of the Senate and Assembly that affects the Physical Therapy Board. Maybe not necessarily the physical therapy profession, because that would be something that CPTA or the California Physical Therapy Association would be interested in, because they advocate for you guys as a profession. We advocate for the consumer of physical therapy services, right? So that legislation that affects the consumer of physical therapy services would be our conversation points here. And then regulation stems from legislation, and so that kind of flows that same way. This, in this particular meeting tomorrow, we'll be going over with the members just the day-to-day business of the board. How many applications have we received? How many renewals have we processed? How many complaints have we received and processed? So they can kind of keep their finger on the pulse of the business of the board and understand what kind of trends are coming or going. Give them a financial report, and let them know how much money we have, how much money we spent, how much money we'll have in the future. Those just the day-to-day kind of business and operations of the business, as well as reports on continuing competency. We have a training component later this afternoon to keep the board members abreast of travel, because they do a lot of travel, so we want to make sure that they're compensated properly. And so, or a training module might be something about the role of a regulator and the role of a board member on a regulatory board, just to kind of refresh that and keep that mind, that idea fresh in their minds. And also to report on the outreach objectives that we've had for our strategic plan, which is kind of a roadmap for us for the next 5 years. And you'll see boards in the back that talk to each specific goal and a measurement of progress. And we're going to be doing a strategic plan update for the board members tomorrow, so we can go over each individual and they can tell us good job or great job, or maybe you need a little more work kind of thing, and then we'll go back as staff to refocus our efforts.
So whenever you guys are discussing these topics, like, do you guys report back to the state, or how does that work once
So-
you guys do come to a consensus?
In a way, we are the regulator for the state, right? And so the board meets quarterly, and then as a result of what the board directs staff to do, we'll go back as employees of the state and make that effectual, and then report back the progress from the previous meeting. The other thing too is we want you as stakeholders, applicants, consumers yourselves, and even future licensees to participate in this process. So like the agenda that's in the back, we publicly notice about 2 to 3 weeks in advance of the meeting. And on every page, you'll see for every day that's represented, we leave a special section called open comment, right? We want the public to be able to come and air their concerns to the board so that they can choose to address it at another meeting. So it's very transparent, which is part of the reason why we wanted you guys here today.
Can I add to that, Jason? Usual element of these board meetings are hearings as well. For this meeting, we didn't have any scheduled, but usually it's a physical therapist or physical therapist assistant who was placed on probation for some sort of misconduct. And then they come before the board after a certain amount of time to ask for a full unrestricted license or to have their probation minimized or decreased. And so that's an opportunity for us to hear from somebody who's on probation, to hear their progress, if they've rehabilitated themselves or not. And an administrative law judge comes, and so it really is like a court session, essentially, where they're heard by their peers, other PTs, but also the public. And then we come to a decision about whether or not we think they should practice with an unrestricted license, or if probation is working for them and we should keep them on probation. So that's a really interesting element of our board meetings that, sorry, we don't have any cases for you. Sorry, not sorry. It's kind of good that we don't have that for you today, but it is really, to me, the most impactful part of the meetings. The reporting is essential as well, but to me, it's about the human sort of element of this as well, not just like us, drafting language for legislative stuff, but also hearing the person who's been affected by, their decisions, and making sure that we're being compassionate, but also protecting the public, which is our mandate. So it's sort of like a delicate balance.
It's an excellent point. So right now, we're being webcast, and that webcast will be archived on YouTube. But all of our previous meetings are archived on YouTube. So the hearings that Katarina is referring to are really good experiences for you as applicants to kind of view, right? So you can see, one, how a licensee got in trouble in the first place. Because in that very courtroom setting, there will be the probationer who's asking for some kind of relief or termination, but there'll also be a deputy attorney general from the Department of Justice for the state that rehashes the case so that the board members can come, catch up to speed and know what they're going to be deciding on. If you are actually there in attendance, it's a very dramatic and sometimes even kind of an emotional experience because this is really their livelihood, right? But so one, you get the experience of what they did to get in trouble because they're going to map that out. And then the beauty of the system and being regulated by a board, because again, it's a 7-member board and 4 of those members are physical therapists, right? So it's a trial by peer, if you will, right? You're gonna have 4 people with intimate knowledge of the profession and 3 people also representing, making a decision on that particular person's circumstances, whether relief is necessary, warranted, or appropriate, right? With the assistance of an administrative law judge, right? So I would encourage you, if you haven't done so already, go to the board's website and under media, you'll find all the previous webcasts. And we are, I think we're actually fortunate. There are no petition hearings today, right? But we usually have 1 to 2 petition hearings and even sometimes 3. So I'd encourage that.
I don't want to say that somebody gets in trouble. I want to say that somebody's actions were made, somebody file a complaint. And sometimes those complaints are based on police action, law enforcement action, that then the board is made aware of those things. So then the board has to evaluate whether or not that individual, that physical therapist or therapist assistant, is suitable, is capable of providing appropriate care without any oversight during that time. So something happened and some action may need to take place. So the board evaluates that information. And then if action is taken against that person's license, then we follow and monitor. They may be put on probation. They may have their license revoked. We've had cases where that's been the decision. And those are tough decisions. At our last meeting in June, that was in Long Beach, we had 3 hearings. So that's a good meeting to take a look and see what happened. Those 3 cases were all based on complaints that were filed because of substance use issues. Fortunately, we don't see very many cases that are based on clinical practice. We do see a few. Those tend to be more about documentation in most cases, I think. But the majority of cases are people have problems with addiction issues, or they make bad decisions in the moment when they're out at a party, and then they decide to get behind the wheel, and then something bad happens. So is that really impact their ability to practice? It's hard to say. We don't know if there's a problem or not. So we ask for investigations, those kinds of things. It's a challenging piece for me as a physical therapist, as a practitioner, as a licensee, to try to interact and to address those kinds of issues with a colleague, and to try to separate out those issues. And is this something that the public that we have to be careful of? That we need to protect the public, and so we need to do some certain things. So it's challenging, but it's very intense when we have a hearing. But I think that we've gotten to really good places through our hearing process.
And those are just the hearings. We also get cases throughout the month that we review and make decisions on also. So.
I would just add to Dr. Drummer's sort of relaying of what the hearings are all about. So after the administrative judge essentially presents us with a case for us to adjudicate a rule on, that usually happens in closed session, much like a jury would be deliberating in closed session.
Can I ask one more thing? So what factors do you guys take into account when making your decision? Like you said, somebody with a DUI, do you find yourself, you tend to agree with law enforcement and whatever verdict that they decide, or whatever punishment they decide to take on the individual, or do you guys take other factors into account?
They're 2 separate processes, really.
Yeah.
One is the legal process. So what has to happen just with the individual and their behavior? I mean, if they got caught as a DUI, or if they caused a major accident, if they end up causing injury to somebody because of their DUI, that's a law enforcement issue. And so that has to follow that channel. We're concerned, our focus is on their ability to practice physical therapy safely and to provide care in an appropriate manner to their patients. In many cases, there's not a big issue, but if somebody has a substance issue, I don't know if they're going to work under the influence. And so we need to one of our jobs is to try to make sure that they're not practicing when they're under the influence. And we may refer them to a substance abuse management program so that they can be evaluated to see if they have a substance issue. And if they do, to get appropriate treatment so that they can get through that, get past it, and be able to figure out how to live life without substances there. Some people, they don't have substance issues, they just made a stupid mistake. They drank too much and they got behind the wheel of a car and then caused a problem. They might be people, though, that we decide, you know what, your professional judgment is, and your professional judgment is part of your judgment. Something that we can't be totally comfortable with saying, yeah, go ahead, not a problem. That was a DUI and this is clinic. Like, I don't know, your decision that you made over here may be impacting what you do in clinic. So we may have somebody keep an eye on you for a little while. So we're going to we're not going to give you a totally free license for a little while. You have to prove yourself. And that's kind of what you do when you're in school, and then you take your exam, you apply to get your license. All of that is proving yourself along the way. So at some point, somebody throws up a red flag and says, then we look at it and say, you might not be where you need to be. So it's putting some reins on and saying, slow down, get life in check, and we're going to watch. And if it's okay, after whatever the period is, then we'll say, yeah, you can practice.
To add to that, we do have some model guidelines so that we're consistent in all of our discipline. So if there is a substance abusing licensee, there's a whole set of guidelines that we consider for that type of offense versus something that might be like Medicare billing or something like that. So we do have a document that we've just revised, actually, that makes sure that we're consistent in all of our decisions so that we're not being unfair based on a wide variety of things that would make us biased. So to answer your question, it might be in the back of the room. Is that back there? Yeah? Okay.
Council
great.
has it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't. The question,
Thanks, Mike.
to your question about do we handle it the same way law enforcement does? One of the clear kind of differences, this is administrative law and that's a criminal situation. So the burden of proof is a little bit different, but the most important part that's kind of different is that the criminal court might do things to that particular person that they would consider punishment or punitive. And everything that this board is going to do should be considered protection of the public. So the conditions of maybe a restriction of a supervisor to observe their sobriety or something, that's not really intended to punish the licensee. That's intended to be put in place to protect the public while the licensee still practices. And so every one of those conditions, the intent behind it is the protection of the public, not to be punitive.
One of the things that I look for and others look for is when someone comes before us and says, I'd like to have my probation terminated or the conditions lessened, is we look for a sense of remorse, accountability, and responsibility. And sometimes we see that, and sometimes we don't. But that is something that we will often discuss and deliberate on. Did this person say, yes, I did make this decision, and it was a horrible decision, and I went through the process, and I'm still going to these meetings, and I'm going to amend my life. I've started to amend my life. These are the things that I've been doing. I'm so very, very sorry. And if that is made clear, a lot of times, we listen to that. But if someone comes and says, well, it was just one time, and I only still drink wine every now and then, and they kind of downplay it a little, that comes into our decision-making process as well. So we want to make sure that someone has learned and has been rehabilitated, yeah. And there's no threat to, we can be confident there's no threat to the public. Yeah, good questions, Juan. I think I heard a second part, though, Mr. Kaiser, about reporting to the state. If you want to just mention briefly the sunset process.
Every board within the Department of Consumer Affairs goes through what we call a sunset process. Right now, your Practice Act, where your laws reside in the Business and Professions Code, there's actually an expiration date, right, that says that this Practice Act will remain in effect until 2021. Well, in 2020, we're going to have to compile a statistical report and narrative and provide it to the legislature to say, here is what the Physical Therapy Board has been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, and this is why we're necessary, this is why we should be here to protect the public. And they take that report and through testimony and also testimony from the professional association or other stakeholders, will look at that and determine, should this board continue to exist or is it even necessary, right? And so everything that we're doing, there's a level of oversight at the legislative level. And then if you think about kind of how we went around the room, there's 7 members, right? And 5 of them are appointed by the governor's office, right? The other 2 are appointed, one by the Senate Rules Committee and the other, the Speaker of the Assembly. So there's a little bit of oversight and balance there too, because if the governor doesn't think that a board is doing what he thinks it should be doing, he can change that appointment at any point. So there's definitely some government oversight, even though we are a government agency.
Did you say we have to do that in 2020?
So, wow. See how scared they are of the sunset process? It's a lot of work. We got a 5-year extension and they still think we just did it. We will start to compile our sunset report in 2020 to testify in 2021. Yes, we will be.
And the reason we got a 5-year extension is because we did so
We're
well.
good.
We did amazingly well.
We're good.
We had, so Jason and Alicia
And Kat?
and Kat
Yes.
had to go to the hearing in front of the legislators and present our information. And there were 3 questions, I think, and they were done in less than 30 minutes. And no other board was out that fast because we got all of our stuff done, because we took care of it.
Shout out to board staff for all the work they put in for that.
absolutely.
They make us look good, yeah.
Great questions, Lon.
Hi,
Hi there.
my name's Kenneth Gemino Brown, and I'm a second-year PTA student as well. I was just wondering, so you guys were talking about how when you come together for hearings, is there like a specific system that you guys have to deciding upon what their I don't know, I can't think of the word. Like what their final, the judgment should be. Yeah, like is there like one person that decides of the outcomes and then like everyone else votes on it, or does it go down the line?
You want me to?
So when we get the cases, we all review those cases individually, and we are not allowed to discuss the cases amongst ourselves unless we are here, and we can do that in closed session. But until we meet each other, hey, mom's the word, and our decisions are all our individual decisions. Somebody might want to expound further on that.
In the example of that administrative hearing, right, where you have a licensee who's asking for a reduction of their discipline or even a reinstatement of their license, that process is facilitated by an administrative law judge, a judge who actually works for the Office of Administrative Hearings and works with the members. The members have an opportunity at that point to ask that licensee direct questions and receive testimony directly from them. The licensee has an opportunity to produce evidence. They're also cross-examined by the Deputy Attorney General, so it's a very court-like setting. Once that's all said and done, The administrative law judge and the board members all go into closed session where they can discuss it amongst themselves. And the administrative law judge actually helps craft what we call that disciplinary order, the final decision. And if they all agree to that disciplinary order, they vote on it and it takes effect. And so as an example, if that petitioner was asking for reinstatement and they were successful in their argument, they convinced all the board members, the ALJ would write a reinstatement order. It would go back out to the board members would vote on it, and as soon as that vote was done, it would become effective and we would notify the licensee.
So after the hearing is done with the licensee, we will go into closed session. So nobody else is in the room, it's just us, and we're talking amongst ourselves. What do you think? How did he do? So it's like a jury. We're having a conversation. We're then coming up with what we think the decision should be.
Yeah, the judge doesn't help us at all with the decision. All they're doing is capturing our ideas and our thoughts and then putting that into language that we're going to eventually sign off on down the line. So there's more of like a facilitator, not one like in a typical courtroom where they would be the one to make a decision. It really is like a jury type of situation where the jury will let the judge know, this is what we've decided, and then the judge will announce, this is the conclusion, yeah.
We should try to display some snippets.
Yeah.
Sizzle reel?
You know,
This is what I mean. That way, you guys can get the feel of it. Yeah, right away.
Were you also curious about just like an initial complaint process?
I mean, yeah, if you want to like elaborate.
but
more
Jason,
on
can I
that.
add this though? We
Yeah,
also have legal
Yeah,
on board
yeah.
with us also, which helps
Yeah.
a lot tremendously, so.
Yeah, and true to the jury, analogy, we are deliberating amongst ourselves. There is not always agreement, which is actually a good sign.
No, there is not.
And it's a good sign. And, sometimes we walk out of the room and we haven't all agreed on everything, but we made a vote and our vote is our vote. And we walk out and, we're still cordial. We're still, it just remains here and we've made our decision. But sometimes we're truly deliberating amongst each other, trying to convince someone to go to the other side or see their point. But that's rewarding in and of itself as well.
And I would just add to that, so I've been on, I've done jury duty, I'm sure many, if not all of you have. No, sorry, I'm pretty soft-spoken, I apologize. So you get the flavor that it's sort of a jury deliberation, but not in the traditional sense, because we also get to ask questions during the hearing, which is not typically allowed in sort of your civil or criminal jury box. And so to sort of echo Ms. Ellaby's comments, the judge also sort of clarifies things for us. He or she is not, their role is not to guide us to a decision, it's really to clarify questions that we might have, as does our legal counsel, who's also present during that. So it's a pretty cool experience, I would say, and we do sort of hash it out. We do not always agree, but we always will try and come to some consensus. And it's for me, as long as I come to it with a very open mind, I feel that it's I'm doing justice to the process, and I am one of currently 5, hopefully soon, one of 7 opinions, and I always appreciate my colleagues' opinions that help form my final decision.
Did you want to say something, Michael? Okay. So initial complaint, as a licensee, we receive complaints from consumers, insurance companies, healthcare providers, other licensees, other license types, and we investigate every complaint that we receive as though it were true until we can disprove that it's not, and then we can close that case. As the administrator of the program, I'm also what you would consider the complainant, right? I actually decide what rises to the level of discipline and what should go before the board. As the executive officer, I think a certain burden of proof has been met under this allegation, and we're going to move it for discipline and go through the administrative process. When that happens, we file what's called an accusation, and the accusation states all the facts that we've collected from that investigation against that licensee or in regards to that licensee. And from there, we will schedule a hearing with the Office of Administrative Hearings. There's kind of a room in there, though, where we can have what we call a settlement agreement, a stipulated settlement agreement, where we can have conversation with respondent, the licensee, and their counsel, and talk about, is there a happy medium that we can come to where I can still feel comfortable that the public is protected, but they're still not so overly burdened that they want to go through the administrative process and have a hearing and go before a judge. If we're able to settle, we'll draw out a disciplinary document that says, here are your probationary, or here is your public letter of reprimand, or whatever level is appropriate for that allegation. If not, they'll go to hearing. If they go to hearing, they actually go before another administrative law judge and are, if represented, it's their counsel against the Attorney General of the state of California, who is acting on my behalf as the complainant in the matter. Whatever the result is of that hearing, whatever that ALJ has decided, would then move forward for this board to review and decide to either adopt, if they agree with the ALJ, or non-adopt, or there's a third one, the disapproval. Doesn't happen very often, but, so the board still is involved in that process, right? So an ALJ would write that opinion and say, using the board's, can you hand me that document? My arm's a little. So these are the guidelines that she was talking about. And so everything that's in this book basically gives you guys, as stakeholders, an idea. You can actually look up a code and see if you violate that particular code, what can you reasonably expect as protection for the public? What kind of conditions would you be under for that condition? And so, as an example, if it was a substance abuse issue, we have been directed by the legislature through a specific bill, SB 1441, that anything that rises to the level of discipline that involves alcohol or drugs shall be handled a certain way, shall involve a rehabilitation program, shall involve bodily fluid testing and abstention from alcohol or controlled substances, shall involve a 12-step program or a worksite monitor. And so you, at your employer, you would have to have somebody at your employee agree to be your worksite monitor, which means they would observe your sobriety on a day-to-day basis and report back to the board. Again, not for punishment, but for protection of the public, that we can still reasonably be assured that you are safe to practice and safe to provide that care. Once that disciplinary order has been written by the ALJ, again, that goes before the board, and if the board has agreed, then they'll adopt it, and then that will go into effect, and that licensee will be subject to that disciplinary document. Is that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's great.
Thank you.
Who's next? Anything really.
Hello, my name is Matt Krager. I'm a student PTA, second year. I was just wondering, do you guys see a universal theme, or I wouldn't say not a theme, but a problem that you guys are noticing around from clinics in this state that you have to deal with, like problems? I don't know if you guys could divulge or, but that stands out per se, that we should be aware of that's going on.
I was surprised at how many DUI cases come before this board. And so for me, I see that is like one of the number one reasons why people end up sitting at that table.
So as the administrator, I will tell you, so we have about 37,000 licensees between PT and PTA in California, right? And so when we say there's a significant number of DUIs, it's important to put that number kind of in context with that licensing population, because really the number of complaints that we even receive, given a 37,000 licensing population, is kind of infinitesimal, right? But the business that actually makes its way through the process and then reaches the board oftentimes is substance related. As the excuse me, as the complainant in the matter, right, as seeing the enforcement cases on just kind of a day-to-day basis, yes, I'd echo that. Don't drink and drive. Please, just don't drink and drive. Don't designate yourself as the designated driver for your friends and then drink and drive. Like, don't do those kind of things. But for trend, and especially for you guys as PTAs, it's important that you understand how you're supervised by your PTs, right? That you know who your supervising PT is at all times, and if you don't, you should seek that clarification. That you do simple things like verify the license of the people that you're working under to make sure that they actually have a license in good standing, and that your colleagues would do that for you as well, right? Documentation is always a big issue, and I'm a big proponent. Documentation is as much there for you as the practitioner as it is for the patient, right? They coined the phrase defensible documentation. Document as though you were considering the audience that might be reading this documentation at a later date, like an investigator, right? Because if there's a complaint filed and we're going to go back and look at your documentation, the clearer you're able to tell us the story, the quicker we can get to it. And it really is there for your benefit at that point. But supervision, I think, probably a really big key, that you are properly supervised, and that our patients reap the reward of receiving both the benefit from the PT and you as the PTA, and maybe not just an aid. Because I think you guys would all want your loved ones, your parents, your siblings, when they go into a practice and pay for services that they think are being administered by either a PTA or a DPT level PT, and just to find out that the services were being rendered by an aide the whole time, you would get infuriated, right? It would upset you. So that's one of them.
That's all I got.
Very good question.
Great question.
Yeah, good question.
Thankfully, we don't see lots of clinic issues. That number has, I think there might have been a few more happening during the first part of my first term. I think we saw a few more of those cases than what we see now. We see very few of those. To me, that means that, or I want to believe that the PT profession, PT providers in this state have paid attention to that, and they're cleaning up their stuff, and they're doing better. Because it hasn't gone the other way, it makes me continue to believe that. And now instead, more than not of the cases that we do see are related to substance use, and usually getting behind the wheel. So, like Jason said, don't drink and drive, but I will add, don't huff and drive, don't do meth and drive, don't do heroin and drive, just stay sober and drive.
Or Lyft and Uber.
Yeah.
Or if you are doing anything, use some other service.
But I'd emphasize, don't meth, don't.
And just echoing the supervision component, in your gut when something is right and when something is wrong. And if you're in an environment and working where your PT supervisor is expecting you to do something beyond what you should be doing, or you don't feel like you're properly supervised, that's your cue to act. I don't know what that act is, but don't do something that that you're not supposed to be doing. Yeah. Sometimes, every once in a while, there'll be someone who has that expectation of you. Maybe. Hopefully you'll never see that. But just do the right thing.
And speak up and say, I don't feel comfortable with this part. What can we do to figure it out? Don't take it on as that there's something that you don't have, or something that necessarily they're doing. They may not know what your comfort level is, what your competency level is. Like, I don't really get what you're talking about with this, and I'm not sure that I can do that. Then have that conversation.
There are more people in the audience that have not asked a question.
I'm surprised there's no questions about like the application process, or like what happens after I graduate, or things like that.
Uh-oh.
Hi, my name is David Mazdio, a student PTA and second year, and I actually was thinking about that as well. What are you guys improving the application process for incoming and new PTAs and future PTAs?
As often as we can, right? To the extent that we can without sacrificing public protection, right? We've made a lot of streamlining efforts in the last 2 to 3 years. The biggest holdup at this point in your application process, you're going to have two. And one is fixed date testing for your national exam, because it's only given 4 times a year, right? So you're going to have those times in between that's a delay that we can't control. And then the second just being you're going to fingerprint for your background check. And sometimes that can be a lengthy process because those fingerprints are going to go to the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And however long that process takes, it takes. But the rest of the process, to the extent that we can control it, we've streamlined it as much as we can.
And then what about applying to a school within California? Are you guys in charge of that process too, as far as what the requirement
Requirements
is?
are?
Yeah.
So CAPTE, which is the accreditor for this program, actually is in control of that. And we've actually, we have that control, but we've deferred that control to CAPTE so that we can adhere to that national standard to get that uniformity across the states. But there's room in the language that if there was an issue with a school that was in violation of one of our codes, but still had gotten CAPTE accreditation, this board could act to stop that board from taking students until they remediated and corrected the issue. So while we've deferred the accreditation to CAPTE, there's still control there that we can exert.
So we don't have control over the school, your application to school, or anybody's application to school. What we have control over is the application to the state for your license after you've completed school.
But as far as like admission requirements and those kind of standards, some of those are just competitive in nature from one school to another. And as long as they adhere to the CAPTE model and accreditation, they're okay with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And from what we hear from reports from staff at each quarterly meeting, the efficiencies that continue to come up sound like the processing time is really getting cut down from when we used to do it on paper. So hopefully more and more schools are seeing that as they're applying through Breeze.
And I always think this is the fun part, right? So, because I get to call members out a little bit, but if you put it in perspective or context, with technology and the advancement in online portals and that kind of thing, applicants have this kind of expectation that this stuff should be instantaneous. You should be able to apply on your phone. It should take us 48 hours. You should give you your license. Even with fixed date testing in place for about the last 5 years, before that it was continuous. You could just book an appointment to take your national exam at your convenience. And so some people waited and some people didn't. There are members here, though, that didn't have that advantage. Some of them had to travel hours, right, to sit down and take a paper and pencil exam that was only given twice a year. So if you were seeking licensure as a PT or a PTA, we were only issuing licenses, continually throughout the year, but because we needed that exam effectually 3-4 times a year total, where now we're doing it as soon as you can meet all the requirements of the application, we issue it as quickly as we can. So it's, in perspective, it's just, what's the context? What are you guys used to? We're trying to get to that, Facebook, Twitter era, and Instagram and expediency. But technology moves a little bit more slowly for government than it does for private industry.
Just an example of what Jason was talking about. I went to physical therapy school in Philadelphia. And so I got my license first in Pennsylvania. And about a year after working in Pennsylvania, I decided that I wanted to move to California. At that time, the law exam was still only on paper. I had to fly out to California. I flew into San Francisco, drove up to Sacramento to take my law exam on paper, and then waited a month I think, before I got word that my license was approved. And I had a working license in Pennsylvania at that time. So just that process took time, but I had to fly 3,000 miles and drive 100 miles. But that's what it was.
Was it in 1970?
That was in 1994. So how many of you were alive in 1994?
And frankly, even, so when he said 30 days, I watched you as a group, and you guys all kind of puppy tilted your heads. But even then, that 30 days was a reasonable expectation because they were giving that exam on paper and pencil. They would have, how many people were sitting in the room with you when you took it?
When I took that exam, there were probably 15, maybe 20 people.
Okay.
That were there at that time when I did, because it was a summer test, and it was only the state law exam.
Jurisprudence, okay.
Jurisprudence exam.
Yeah.
So that's a second, so you have to take the national PTA licensing exam. You have to do that, but then you also have to take a state jurisprudence, so reviewing the state laws. So should be another little coaster card back there that gives you a link to the state laws. So that's an important link to be able to look at. It's a PDF document. It's live, so as things change with laws, that gets updated. That will be really important, really easy for you to review so that you have that information when you need to take the law exam. So that's the other piece of the puzzle.
Like you, Jason, I was looking at their faces too, and this young man, he goes,
Yeah. I was talking.
So you know they want their results of their test back in an hour.
Oh no! See, that's the expectation.
It's a written portion, and you have to grade it
So
all
this
night
is
long.
this is a shameless plug for the applications and licensing unit, and I'd get in trouble if I didn't do it. But so the example there is when you sit down for the national exam, the Federations of State Boards of Physical Therapy administer that exam for you, right? They're not actually going to release your test scores to us as the jurisdiction for 10 to 14 days, right? So you'll sit down. You can't have the hour-long expectation of us because we're not even going to get your scores for almost 2 weeks, right? But once we get them in a bulk, for everybody that sat down on that same day all over the United States, right? Everybody that is doing it for California, we have to process those in the application, so it's going to take some time. I was speaking to one of your instructors earlier about the California law exam, okay? Don't sleep on the California law exam. Study for it. The pass rate for the California law exam is not as good as the MPT. More applicants fail the jurisprudence than fail the national exam. On the first try. On the second try, after everybody studied, doesn't seem like there's much of a problem. They make it all the way through. So study for it. It's important. And really, it comes back to ownership and having that little license and getting a license to practice this. It's your obligation as a licensee to understand the laws and regs that govern your profession. You got to be aware of it.
If when you're reviewing that information, you have a question, ask your instructors or send an email to us. Our emails are on the board website.
Yep. Are we going to start picking who asks questions next? Ooh. You just saved someone else.
Yeah. So earlier you said.
You can use the microphone.
Oh, sorry. So earlier you said like sometimes you just don't get the right feeling in your gut, right? And you should act upon it. So my question was like, say you did have that feeling, what is the process that you go through? Do you go on the website and file a complaint? Do you call somebody, or like who do we actually start to begin the process?
So I think what Dr. Amon Ari was kind of alluding to is that as PTAs, you might be put in kind of precarious, awkward positions by your supervising PTs, and you might have that feeling, right? And so it's kind of a professional discretion decision at that point. Can you remediate your supervising PT at that point? Can you, just through conversation with them, solve the problem? Or is it something that you think is egregious? If it's egregious and it rises to that level, we would encourage that if you see something, say something. If you feel like you have to file a complaint with our board, file that complaint. We will investigate it. As a preface, though, I'll say, give us something to investigate, right? So sometimes we receive complaints that so-and-so practice is overbilling, and that's the total of the complaint. And it's anonymous, so there's no contact for us to reach back out to try and get more information. We can only investigate that complaint so far. If it's egregious enough, maybe we'll do an on-site and we'll send an investigator out there to pull random records and see if there's something we can find. But it's much easier for us to investigate it if you say on a specific date when certain patients were being seen and certain licensees were on staff and that kind of thing, we can go in and investigate it much more thoroughly. But as PTAs, I give you the same advice that I give PTs. Employers oftentimes are going to ask PTs to do things that aren't ethical, maybe even illegal, maybe against their own practice act. And at that point, they're going to have to make a decision in their own professional discretion on what they have to do. And if that means maybe even leaving that place of employ, that privilege to practice, that license that you hold is yours and yours alone, right? And so if a violation occurs under your license, the only person that's under the jurisdiction, it's not even the person, it's that license you hold. The only thing that I have jurisdiction over is that license that practice privilege was done under. I can't really discipline the registry that you worked for or discipline the hospital staff that you were working for at the time or something like that. You really have to make that decision on your own, not to put yourself in that kind of risk.
I've had some students graduate and come back to me either by phone or email and explain to me what's going on. And I've been able to give those students, some direction on what to do. So if you're in a sticky situation, reach out to your colleagues, reach out to your past instructors, reach out to people to bounce your ideas off of them, and they'll hopefully give you some good things to think about so you can make a good decision.
I will say that we have seen some companion cases of two different licensees in the same work setting both be disciplined for similar acts because you see it happening, right? Or you're also complicit in the act. And so just because you see somebody else doing it, perhaps you're supervising PT, you're also responsible for your actions. So it does happen.
It does.
Not often.
Awkward silence.
One more question?
Oh, you have to rotate out?
Oh, quiz.
Understood. All right.
Thank you all for being here. Good luck on your quiz. Ethics quiz. You'll all get A's. They're coming in. So while we're waiting for them to come, oh, you need a recess? Okay, so we're going to recess for 10 minutes. Let's start at 2:05 sharp. So we'll give you guys a chance to go to the bathroom.
You're welcome to come in, though.
Yeah, come on in. Come on in. Is 2:05, and we'd like to continue with agenda item number 13, which is our physical therapy student question and answer forum. And for the new group that just came in, we'll allow the board members and those of us up at the front to just give an introduction of ourselves, please. Starting with Dr. Drummer, please.
My name is Daniel Drummer. I'm a physical therapist, member on the board. I'm a PT. I work at San Francisco General Hospital. I'm in the second year of my second term. So we have I'm in 4-year terms, and I'm in halfway through the second term.
Hi, I am Tanya McMillan, and I am a public member on this board, which means I am not a physical therapist or a physical therapist assistant. I'm actually a family child care provider, and this is my first term. I was appointed by the Senate Rules Committee, and it's really been great learning what you guys do and working with my fellow board members.
Sorry. I was appointed by the governor. Several of us appointed by governor, and 2 of us appointed by other bodies.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katerina Ellaby. I'm also a public member on the board. I was appointed by the governor about 6 years ago, so I'm in my second term as well. And I am a recipient of physical therapy services and have really enjoyed my time on the board. So thank you for being here and hosting us.
Good afternoon. My name is Jesus Dominguez. I am a physical therapist, but an educator now. I I'm an associate professor at the DPT program at the University of Southern California. And like Dr. Drummer, I think we both were appointed by Governor Brown within a month of each other. So I'm in my second term, second year. Is that right, kind of? Yeah, so thank you for sharing some time with us today.
Alicia Rabina Amen. I'm a physical therapist, and I'm in my third year of my second term. Work at University of the Pacific and also do home health care and acute care, and enjoy my time immensely on the board.
I'm Michael Knotes. I am not a board member. I am the board's legal counsel, and I'm basically here as a resource to ensure the board takes care of open meeting requirements and to do other duties as required.
I'm Jason Kaiser. I'm the executive officer of the board, the administrator of the program. I'm not a physical therapist, but I am a perpetual consumer of physical therapy services, especially since I've been working for this board. But anyway, that's a longer story.
Hi, I'm Brooke Arneson. I'm part of board staff, and I do the legislation and regulation for the board. Also not a board member, just to be clear.
And so we would love to entertain any questions or concerns that any of you have. If you would just take the microphone and say your name and what year you are in the program, and go ahead and ask any of us any questions that you might have some curiosities about.
Who's going to be the first brave soul?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you all for having us here. My name is Miranda, and I was just wondering if the board has any involvement in insurance companies, and if so, what is the involvement?
I would say no, we do not, at the board level at least. I will say that sometimes we have issues with insurance companies not wanting to employ physical therapists or physical therapist assistants that we have placed on probation for a wide variety of reasons, and that's an issue we have with insurance companies because we believe that they're still capable of practicing, and it's not a public protection issue to allow them to practice under certain supervision. But insurance companies don't want the liability of employing these individuals, which makes it hard for us to monitor them and ensure that they're capable of an unrestricted license down the line. So we do have some issues with insurance companies, but it's far and few between, but we see it as a major issue in us being able to fulfill our mandate of public protection. So,
thank you.
Just to clarify, it's not the insurance company that's employing the therapist or the therapist assistant. It's the physical therapist, the clinic owner, who's employing them. The clinic owner has to have insurance for the clinic, though, for malpractice insurance for the services that they're providing. The insurance company doesn't want to provide insurance for the clinic because there's an employee who's on probation. For some reason, the insurance companies think that that's a bigger liability. We actually have a clause in our regulation that says that we don't believe that somebody who's on probation is a liability. It should not affect their ability to be able to work. There are conditions that we set with probation that help to make sure that that's not going to be a problem. We're taking care of that public protection piece. But we're hearing very often that insurance companies are refusing to insure, telling the clinic owner, we're not going to continue your insurance if you have somebody on probation working for you.
thank you for the clarification.
As the administrator, I'll take a kind of a different task. The board typically does not get involved with payment for services, right? Until those payment for services create some kind of an ethical or legal violation of law where you've defrauded the consumer in some way. Then the board would get involved there. But as far as what services are worth what per hour or per unit or per billable unit or something like that, we don't regulate that part of it. But if, let's say, you provided an hour's worth of services, but you were billing an hour and a half or something like that, and we were able to prove that in an investigation, that's something we're looking at. Not so much because it was insurance-based, but it's an ethical and legal violation.
That makes sense.
Additionally, we've heard of insurance companies just not refusing to pay. A health insurance company refusing to pay for services that were provided by a physical therapist or assistant who was on probation. So they're not paying the therapist or therapist assistant because they're on probation. So because they don't want to, they don't want somebody who's on probation providing care to their. So that becomes another way that it gets muddy, and it's not something that we believe that we have enough protections put in place that it should be okay.
Did that answer the crux of your question, though?
It did, thank you.
Pick someone, Miranda.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Less practical partner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Knoll. I'm in the second year of PTA school. I see that you provide information to California consumers about what physical therapy is, and I was just wondering what those vehicles for communication are. For example, is it a matter of someone's already going to a physical therapy office and there are brochures on hand, or are there some other methods that you use?
That is a great question.
Yes, love that question.
And it is very relevant and timely. The Physical Therapy Board of California feels like there is an outreach issue with not just applicants, licensees, educational programs, but also consumers. And consumers are our hardest group to reach out to get that information and deliver it to them. In some ways, we actually utilize licensees to do that through a notice to consumer. Right? There's actually a regulation that requires you as PTs and PTAs to have posted a little poster, a little sign that kind of says, "Did you know?" and it points them back in our direction, right? So that we can get them engaged at the first person perspective that you guys have as licensees. Other than that, website information, social media, email blasts to subscribed lists and so forth. But trying to proactively deliver information, the next experiments that we're going to be running with are health programs, insurance programs, to try and get them to collaborate with us to deliver that to their constituents as well. But it's one of our biggest challenges.
And we are open to ideas.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have any ideas of how we can do that, we want to hear about those because we definitely want to reach out to consumers. We do a newsletter twice a year that's posted on our website, but that would have to be something that consumers were kind of looking for. We don't have an avenue to necessarily push that out to them right now. But they're definitely one of the audiences, the main audience that we're trying to attract in that newsletter. So now it's just a matter of how do we get that out there regularly.
We have a very small contingent of consumers that subscribe to that newsletter. We'd like to increase that number quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Now you get to pick somebody.
Popcorn.
Hello, my
Hi
name's
there.
Jackie. I'm in my second year here at our PTA program. I was just wondering, I guess it's almost kind of a personalist question. For you members that are not licensed, you said you were appointed. How did that possibly come to be? Like, how did you, it's hard for me to understand how you go from maybe being a patient or whatever to then becoming a member of this board. So I was just curious.
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I honestly didn't even know that there was a physical therapy board. I didn't know I could check licenses for all the different healthcare providers that I had, let alone my mechanic and my barber and everything. So I sort of stumbled into this role. I worked for a nonprofit that helped place African American professionals on various governing boards, including commissions. And so through working at that organization, I was able to meet the governor's appointment secretary, and she suggested that I apply. So if not for that specific moment in time, I probably would not be here today. Not to say that I'm not enjoying this, and this is an amazing experience. And I really advocate for anybody to sort of engage in democracy this way. It's very reassuring to know that there are all of these public protections in place for consumers. But it was just a total fluke. I would have never known to apply online or that governors even appointed people to boards. It was a very strange and new experience for me. So if you know of anybody, we have 2 vacancies currently on our board, one for a PT or PTA and one for another public member. And so it is sort of a struggle to like let people know that these are opportunities that they have to sort of engage in the government. And so that's my story. Tanya, would you like to share yours?
So, like Katerina, I didn't know anything about boards or commissions or anything either, but I have been an advocate for children for the last 10 years, and I've worked really close with many of the legislators at the Capitol, in particular at the time, Kevin De Leon, who was the Senate Pro Tem. And so he made his did the appointment and appointed me, and I'm getting all these phone calls from folks and congratulations, and I'm just like, for what? Okay. And then the Senate Rules Committee person called me and told me, and I was happy. I clicked my heels. I was like, okay, fine. And so that is how I ended up on this board, and I am so glad that that he did what he did, because I've learned so much about what you guys are doing. And I've also been a recipient of physical therapy. I had a tumor removed from my leg, and so I had to go through physical therapy, and my therapists were amazing. It was painful, but but they really, really made my life so much easier. And so that's how I ended up here. And this is my first term, so I'm up for reappointment, and it's going to happen.
And in terms of the people appointing, do they converse with the rest of the board? Do you guys have anything to do with who gets put on it, or do they have like a list of qualifications and they check off, okay, this person's a good person to appoint to the board? Like, how does
That's
that
what the
work?
pro tem thought about me. He said, oh, she's a great person.
There actually is some structure to that. So as the administrator of the program, we have seven possible appointments, 5 from the governor's office, 1 from the Senate Rules Committee, 1 from the Assembly Speaker. As a licensee, as a licensed physical therapist, being licensed for 5 years, you can apply for one of those 4 professional positions. And then there's the application process with the governor's office as a consumer. For the Senate side and the Assembly side, sometimes it's kind of a voluntold kind of process. So like with Tanya's case, she was very familiar with the Assembly Speaker at the time. He thought she would be a good fit. He appointed her to this board. For the governor's appointment secretary, they will reach out and give us a list of names that they're considering, especially if it's for a licensed position. And we'll go through and make sure that that person has a good license and good standing with no discipline, and they've been licensed for appropriate years. But as far as collaboration with the board, no. They're trying to create as diverse a group as possible, and in just every definition of the word diverse that you can think of. As an example, with the professionals that are on the board right now, you have home health represented, you have a clinical setting and a hospital setting represented, you have the educational system represented. So they're trying to, as the administrator, help me out as much as possible to give me those tools and resources to work with. And the consumer side of it, the public members of the board all come from very different backgrounds and have different skill sets that benefit as well. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Jared. I am also a second year at Carnegie College Physical Therapy Assistant Program. And I also had a communication question kind of similar to Susan. I know, or with my limited experience with the PTPC, that part of what you are helping to do is partially enforcement for consumer protections for individuals who are receiving physical therapy. So I was interested more in the process, because it sounds like a lot of where the success has been coming is from other physical therapists or other people in the field making a claim. So I was kind of interested in what that claim process looks like, and then also what the potential protections are for the person who's filing the claim against reprisal.
So there's a whole section designated consumer protection that we would call our enforcement unit, right? And so we field all complaints from fellow licensees, fellow other licensed healthcare practitioners, mostly consumers, and then even employers or insurance companies or what have you. So a plethora of different types of complaints coming in. But all complaints that come in are investigated the same way as though they were true, right? At first glance, it's pretty easy to determine whether or not a complaint has some kind of merit to it and how much more investigation needs to be applied to it. And so if it's warranted, we have what we call expert consultants that are assigned to the board, which are fellow licensees that have been licensed in 5 years, and we can choose from a list based on geography, specialty, demographics, and so forth to kind of help us assist in the investigation of that complaint. And we also rely on the Department of Consumer Affairs Division of Investigation, where we have a sworn officer actually go out with that expert consultant to help if it's warranted. That investigation process can be as lengthy as any criminal investigation process, because sometimes, you know, an allegation can be as egregious as sexual misconduct or patient harm, embezzlement, fraud. Those kind of things can be very lengthy for as far as the investigation process goes. The second part of your question, I'm not sure I understood.
So I guess what I was wondering is when everyone's filing a claim, you know, I'm assuming there's a sense of anonymity, like you're not going to be sought out.
Yeah.
So I'm interested if someone is suspected of filing a claim and it turns out to be true, what are some of the avenues that you can do to help protect that individual who's filing the claim?
To the extent that I can protect the anonymity, we will. But ultimately, constitutionally speaking, you know, everybody has a right to face their accuser. So if you see something that you think warrants a complaint, but anonymity is that important to you, remain anonymous. Don't reveal to me, as the complainant in the matter, what your identification is. That way I don't have to, at some point in the future through discovery, reveal who you are. Having said that, that makes it very difficult for us to be able to conduct an investigation, right? You would then have kind of a limited subset of evidence. I wouldn't have an ability to reach back to you and ask you further, questions, qualifying questions, more detail, that kind of thing, because that would give me a chain to kind of reach back to figure out who you are, and I would have to reveal that in discovery at some point. So, filing a complaint against a colleague or, another licensee, I realize is sensitive and very difficult to do. And that there is some liability or a risk for you in an employment setting, in a friendship setting, and those kind of things. But we would just stress that you do the right thing. We would ask you to, kind of make that decision and hope you do the right one.
Sure.
And let me just add that as the complaint is being investigated, there is a protection in terms of confidentiality of the investigation itself. The only time the name of or identity of a complainant would be revealed is if the board staff and the investigators determine that it's a legitimate claim and it's going to now go through the legal process. So it's a little bit different at that stage because it's been substantiated that at least in terms of the board, that they believe that it's true, and then the licensee has rights to appear before an administrative law judge, and ultimately all cases are decided by this board that you see in front of you.
Okay. The only thing I'd add to that too is, in that situation, if there was some kind of retaliation against the complainant, that would very much be considered in the complaint itself. I mean, you'd have that protection, at least from the board's perspective, that would be a violation in and of itself of the person that was being complained about.
And do you see that at all?
I have once or twice, but it's, I've actually been doing this for quite a while now. I used to say I was the rookie in the room, but as long as I've been doing it now, once or twice, so it hasn't really been a concern.
Okay. By the time the cases reach us, on the board members, the information has been redacted and reduced to just first and last initial, those kinds of things, so that the people are protected. The members of the board aren't actively involved in any of the investigation. It's only the material after all of that's been done that we may be presented information for decisions.
Yeah, I can see how maybe a new licensee would be a little apprehensive to report certain things, but definitely if you feel comfortable running it by a colleague or running it by one of your professors that you had to seek advice on that. I do get some students come back to me either by email or a call and ask me about certain cases. And, personally, I know after the first couple of years, I felt pretty confident knowing when to report something. I've never reported anything that I needed to the board, but APS or CPS. There are people out there who sign the form every year that, yes, I've had the training, and yes, I'm a mandated reporter, and they don't report. But we're mandated reporters, and so I learned very quickly to report, and I'd like to think that after a couple years, that apprehension to report to the board wouldn't have been there, so, yeah.
I would echo that, and I'd just add this for you guys just to consider. We've already kind of expressed there's an outreach concern on the board of what licensees know and don't know. So consider, as recently graduated, you may actually be more familiar with the law than the long-term licensees that you're going to be surrounded by when you get into the workforce. Right? You just took the jurisprudence exam, you just went through the whole school system, laws change, and we do have, practitioners out there that haven't paid attention to those law changes in a long time. So consider that.
Thank you.
Who's next? Jared, pick somebody.
Oh, there you go.
My name's Lawrence.
Hi, Lawrence.
I'm a second-year student here at Carrington. More of a personal question, I guess. For those who are PTs on the board, are you guys still practicing? And if you are, how much sort of extra workload do you have to take on being a board member? And how do you balance that out?
Can I do something fun with this question real quick? So I love this question. I'm going to do this just by showing of hands in the class, right? How many of you are under the impression that these board members have office space at the Physical Therapy Board of California? Right?
Yeah.
So they don't, right? They all have careers of their own. They serve with us on a volunteer basis. It's their own time. I mean, we compensate them minimally. It's not that great, but it's a per diem kind of basis. So they absolutely don't do it for the money. They're doing it for their love and the profession.
So I work full time. I work 40 hours a week at San Francisco General, and the time here, this is 2 8-hour days, 2 days of meetings, but the rest of the time we review case materials, we review other things. It balances out to maybe a couple hours a week. Sometimes it's a little heavier, sometimes it's a little lighter, but yeah, that's about what it gets to. Yeah, but like Jason said, we don't have office space. We do have an email account through the board, through the state, but no phones, no pagers, no office space, no company car. Yeah.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
So, I am a licensed member, but I'm an educator now. So, unlike Dr. Drummer, so my work week is about 172 hours a week in the education. So, but for me, it's important for me to maintain my license in an active status because I do go over to the hospital with students more in an instructional context. But like Dr. Drummer says, we don't have any office space. We don't have any company cars unless you consider Enterprise Rent-A-Car, maybe a company car. And a lot, right, or Ford Fiesta, but a lot of it has already been said. We do get cases that we review on our own time. I think if I didn't keep my day job, I'd be financially in dire straits. So we do this really not for the financial gain, certainly not, but we do this because we find it of value and importance.
How often do you see each other?
Once every 3 months.
4 times a year.
At this type of meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in the PT Practice Act that our stipend is $100, or per diem, $100 per day of work. So each of us is getting paid $100 for today, for 8 hours.
Well, look, and actually, it's important for you guys to know it like this too. That $100 a day that they're receiving is going to be directly paid by your application fees as applicants and your renewal fees as licensees. We don't receive any taxpayer money. It's completely special funds. So the licensing population pays for that, and you as applicants pay for it as well.
And additionally, it pays for the office space, it pays for the salaries of all of our employees, and all of the rest of the things, all of the rest of the operations of this board. So the handout stuff that's in the back, all of this stuff is paid by licensing fees. So we're really self-sufficient in a way that way. And we keep the board, one of the board's duties is to keep track of the budget and to make sure that we're not wasting that money, because we're accountable to you guys, because you're the ones who are paying to keep the board, I'm paying to keep the board going too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't even give them a break on their renewal fees.
No, we don't. So I work in clinical education at UOP, and I also do home health care, probably see anywhere from 2 to 6 patients a week. And then I'll do one Saturday a month at Kaiser in acute care just to keep my acute care skills up. But physical therapists sometimes are workaholics. We work. As president of the board, you put in a few more hours usually. Some months are a little lighter, some months are heavier. I live in Stockton and the office is in Sacramento, so if there's an important meeting that needs to happen face-to-face, I've had the flexibility to be able to do that many times, but for other board members who live a little further, that's harder to do. But they've also done that in the past where they've come up to make very important meetings, but it adds a few more hours to the month, but not tons. But it's all completely worth it.
Okay.
It's very worth it. Yeah. Great question.
I'm not as reluctant to pay my fees now.
That's so
you.
good to hear.
You said your name was Lawrence?
Lawrence, yeah.
Well, thank you for asking how the public members, how we handle the time also. So,
Sorry, I forgot to leave you out. Didn't mean to leave you guys out.
Yeah, I'm glad you called on me too. Thank you. Yes, Lawrence, I'll be glad to tell you.
Her birthday was this past week, so she's feeling special.
But
How did you balance?
So I am a child care provider. That's my day job. And I do work between 60 and 70 hours a week. But I'm also heavily involved with my union with SEIU. So I give them about 60 and 70 hours a week also. So I barely sleep. And in between that, I'm doing board work and looking at cases. But on a serious note, when the cases come to us, I do have a process on how I, number one, read them, how I understand them, and then how I feel about the cases when they come to me. And so I set aside times because I did realize very early doing this work, I can get a case and I can read it and I might be having a really, really bad day. And that affects how I think and how I process what I'm reading in this case. And so I do my first reading, and then I set it aside. And then I come back probably the next day, and then I reread it, because this is a practitioner's life on the line, and my decision will affect their lives. And so I take it extremely serious. It's not something that's fly by night. And me as a public member, I'm also thinking about the public protection. So I've got to look at it from that perspective. And thank God that I am on a board with folks who do know about it, so that when we do come, if it does end up being a hearing, then I've got my questions all lined up where I can ask my fellow board members when we go into closed sessions, or if they're still relevant. So it does take some time, but it's valuable time, and it's not fly by night the way that the cases are addressed.
I will say, as a millennial, we tend to change jobs pretty frequently, unlike our parents and grandparents. So part of my interview process with any new employer is letting them know about my physical therapy board appointment and my commitment to fulfilling all 4 years of my term. And if that's an issue, then don't hire me, because this is really important to me. So I take it very seriously as well. It is something that I feel is an integral part of my career and my life, and I wouldn't just take another job for the money. I really do feel like I'm making an impact on this board, and I would hate to not fulfill the governor's expectation for me to fulfill my term. I take that. I mean, the governor of the state asked me to do this job. Like, I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Did you guys notice when she said parents and grandparents, she looked right at me?
Lawrence, this is a distraction, I know, but
Okay.
what I would tell you is the volume of work that they have is very contingent upon kind of the volume that my staff and what they have as work as well. So as an example, if there's an influx of complaints for some reason, they're ultimately going to see an influx of work. Right?
Okay.
And so sometimes there's a lull and it's a little bit easier, and sometimes it can be really hectic.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
For Ms. McMillian, while she said 60 to 70 hours, as the administrator of the program, I spent a lot of time at the Capitol, in the Capitol, and she's there 4 times more than I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Curiosity, a question, anything, it's okay.
Hello, my name is Josh. I'm a second year here at Carrington. I was just curious about those of you that are still practicing. So does being on the board, how do I word this? Being on the board, is there like any direct benefit, like, for your practice? Like, do you take back to like teaching?
Yes. We learned so much being on this board, and we don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad to be able to bounce things off of Mr. Kaiser frequently. But what I do learn, I do share with students, but also with the public, with my patients.
Okay.
So that notice to consumers in home health, I always tell them on my first visit, you have rights and responsibilities as a patient. You have the right to complain. That's one of them. You can complain to my supervisor, you can call the office, but you also have the right to complain to the Physical Therapy Board of California. And I'm the president, I don't tell them that. I just show them the notice.
Oh, okay.
But, being on the board has really emphasized just how important that piece of paper is. And so I think that's a benefit to the consumers, that not only am I emphasizing it, but even with, a little more passion than before I was on the board. Yeah. But other than that, no benefits. I don't get to the front of the line at the club or anything like that.
I actually think it's the role of the public members on the board to make sure they're not financially benefiting from any decisions that are made, when this position as board members. Like, they shouldn't be lining their pockets because they're board members. That's absolutely not what they're here for or should be here for. So I think having that diversity of practitioners and public members sort of checks them to let them know and let the public know, like, there's people here who don't have a practice, that don't have a license, that are genuinely just serving as a volunteer, to make sure that there's eyes on people who could benefit from
Yeah.
that type of.
I really appreciated your question because when you first stated it, as the administrator, I was going to say, they better not. Each one of them that's here has to file a conflict of interest statement, a Form 700, to prove to the legislature, the governor's office, that they're not benefiting in any way from their service on this board. I didn't even think about like the educational and knowledge and that benefit that it could provide, so I appreciate that. But what they do here, as Kat said, I don't, $100 a day for work. I mean, I'm lucky
Yeah.
I can hold on to board members as long as I do at this point. So I thank them for their service. And it really is service. It's not a benefit per se. I don't even know that, in the last session, Dr. Drummer touched on an issue where his fellow coworkers don't realize that he actually serves on the physical therapy board as opposed to the California Physical Therapy Association, right? So that there's this recognition issue that you would think maybe as a misnomer they might have some kind of special brand, like I'm a board member. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think she was able to catch on to my question. It was more of like the knowledge that you guys gain from being on the board. How do you relay it back to education, practice?
Go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to add, so I have to confess, before I was appointed to the board, I probably had the misconception now of you just don't want to cross paths with the board. The board is the punishment enforcer. And that's not anything that anyone wants to even contemplate. But I will tell you, after being on this, I guess, this side of the Wizard of Oz curtain, that's not at all what this board's mandate is. And so being able to take that back to my educational institution is, I think, very a valuable sort of piece that I can provide to our students, not just our students, but all students. And really sort of clue folks into what the real what the mandate is and what the real function of the board is. It's not an enforcer of punishments as we all unknowingly assume that to be quite different.
Thank you.
I have another question.
No, I'm sorry, not until every.
I'm sorry, I just had another question off of what came up with that conversation. So in terms of board members and our public representatives or people that are still practicing, how does it play out if there is a case in which you or someone involved in conflict of interest? How does that work?
So board members have to recuse themselves from voting if they know the person that is being accused or the respondent. If they know them, recognize their name. We can't look up anybody on Facebook or anything, but if we recognize their name and we know that we have a relationship with them, we can't vote on that case.
If a member can't remain impartial, given that type of circumstance, they should recuse themselves, and they should consider perception in that recusal as well. What if they were the subject of the complaint? What if the complaint was about one of them? Right? We would investigate that complaint as though it was true.
Has that ever happened?
Unfortunately, yes, it has. Thankfully not under my leadership. It didn't happen to me, and knock on wood. But it has happened in the past where a sitting board member has actually had to be disciplined as a result of an investigation.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just also going to ask, you guys said not a lot of people know that you're actually on the board. If someone does, like one of your fellow PTs, PTAs, et cetera, and they come to you and ask you directly, like, do you think I'm going to get in trouble for this or something like that? Are you not allowed to say? Like, what do you say to them?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a very interesting question. I would think that a board member can certainly share his or her knowledge about the practice as an ambassador of the profession. But if it comes down to specific situations that could come before the board as a complaint, then the board members should probably defer them to either their supervisor, their professional association, or to legal counsel if it comes to that.
So if somebody that I worked with did that, I would have to recuse myself from any kind of discussion because I know that person intimately because of my work relationship with them. So I wouldn't even be able to be involved with the case. But I might try to give a little bit and try to, just from the law perspective, try to relay as much as I could from what's written, but as providing personal advice as a board member, like, I couldn't do that. And I would have to say, tell them that I can't do that. I know a number of physical therapists up and down the state, and I have on a couple of occasions received emails, personal emails, people looking for advice because they want to know what should happen with this particular individual who the board filed action against. And I have to tell them immediately, I can't read this, I have to stop, I can't even talk to you about it, because if you want me involved in potentially being able to resolve the case in the future, which having me as a PT might be helpful for you to be there, you can't get me involved ahead of time. You have to wait till I get to that point.
And I would say, for me, because this has happened to me in the past, being an educator, first thing I say is I know you. I have to recuse myself, and I would probably speak, or I have spoken in very general terms of just referring them to the Practice Act, sort of advising them to seek advice and opinions from others, because I can in no way participate in that process. And just as a form of counsel, I always tell them, just be honest, just be transparent, be honest. You would be surprised how far that will get you. Not assuming that if like poker, this is not a poker game. You don't need to hold your cards very tight for fear that you might sort of bring upon you an unfavorable decision. Just be honest. And I think this board, I'm pretty confident, and I think I will try and speak for the board. I think we're reasonable people here. We're trying to do the right thing, given our mandate to protect the public.
Also, sorry, I have one more question. When you guys do get cases, you said like when you're in the middle of working, et cetera, you have to set aside time to review a case. Do you have a time limit on like when you need to be done with that, and how long is that?
So the board staff usually gives us about a week to respond to a case that we receive via email, like in a PDF. And some cases are longer than others, but they take into consideration sort of the depth and breadth of the materials that we're reading. It's a lot of legalese, and so it's hard to, give it just a couple hours and be done with it. We really do want to make sure we're giving them the right to a fair assessment of the facts, and, some are like transcripts where it's like conversations during a hearing that was probably an hour-and-a-half hearing that we have to read.
Yeah.
So Audible would be helpful in those cases, yeah.
There are a lot of timelines in the administrative process that I and my staff have to adhere to. And so we try to consider that when we're providing cases to the board members. We give them a very good idea of when we need their review back. And sometimes, like they said, based on the case, if it is detailed and complex, that's part of the consideration, maybe a week or something. But there are times where we give them 24 to 48 hours, because of the administrative process and where we are. So the timeline can turn around very quickly.
I'll just add to that, my gratitude to Mr. Kaiser, because he's pretty good about texting us, you have DCA email, because I'm not always on top of checking the Department of Consumer Affairs email that I'm assigned.
When you asked about recusing yourself from a case, and I know that Katarina said like if you know the person, and Jason said if you can't make a, fair judgment. Yeah, exactly. I know there's only been one case that I had to recuse myself from, and I didn't know the person, but there were so many other elements in that case that I was very familiar with, that it really would have affected my participation or even decision in that. And like Dr. Dominguez said, I am so appreciative of Jason because I knew that I had to recuse myself, but I needed to make sure I was following the proper guidelines to do it. And I reached out to him and told him exactly what it was. And so I was right in recusing myself. So you don't always have to know the person, but if there's any part of that case that affects your decision, then we all have that good judgment and the mandate to recuse ourselves.
Yeah. It's very similar to serving on a jury. There's a lot of different things that can affect your ability to remain impartial. It could be just the circumstances of the case hit just too close to home, and just based on the fact that there is a case, your decision's made. Well, that's not impartiality. You're going to have to recuse yourself at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got a few more minutes. Who's got a burning question?
Oh, Josh did. He just hollered out the question. I'll answer it for you, Josh. So, yes, we do have other mandated trainings that we have to take. So we have to do sexual harassment training and ethics. And thank you for asking that, Josh. You are number one, yes.
They even have to take defensive driving training.
Yes.
Because when they rent a state vehicle through Enterprise.
How about from-
Application questions? Interested in the application process? No?
So one of the things, after you finish school, you're going to apply to take the exam, the national exam. That's the big one that you have to do. But you also have to take a California law exam, the jurisprudence exam. So, because you have to know the laws in this state in order to be able to get a license to practice. One of the coaster cards that you got has a link to a PDF, which is all of the laws and regulations that are in the state. That PDF is updated live. So as laws change, that PDF will change. So when you guys are ready to take the law exam, then that information will be up to date. Study that information. We have more people fail that law exam on the first try than fail the national exam, because they think that, it's easy, I don't have to worry about it. I'll be able to just do it. If you don't pass that, you don't get your license. So study that information so that you can be able to pass the law exam. Boost the number that we see as to how many people pass or fail the exam, so that we know that you have the information that you were able to do it. So, because you don't want to have to take that exam a second time just because. Do it once, get it done, do it right.
In the last few minutes, if my tally is correct, if you guys ask one more question, you'll have beaten the first group.
Anybody competitive?
Okay, Miranda.
Just curious, you said a couple people were talking about serving on their second term. How many terms can you serve? Is there a limit?
The limit is 2.
Okay.
We did have a very short number of board members a number of years ago, and several of us were brand new. And so there was a special exception made to allow the one sitting board member with more than a year's worth of experience to be able to sit for a couple more years.
Okay.
But that was a special exception that was made, so that there was some continuity and so that the board could continue to function well. And that made a huge difference for us because it gave us a really good base to be able to continue. And yeah, Alicia's in her second term. Jesus and I are in our second. Katarina's in her second. Yeah. So, and we all did have done a good enough job that we were reappointed. So for some reason.
Jason, is it 2 consecutive terms? If we were to term off, could we come back?
If they term off, they can come back, right? So we have had members in the past that did 8 years and then termed off for 4 and came back and served again, later, but it's 2 consecutive terms.
Okay.
And then there's a year grace period, so 9 is like kind of the average, but.
Okay. I actually do have one more question. Tanya, I think that you had touched on it a little bit, but what is, if any, the continuing education like for board members?
None, right? For,
Board member training.
other than,
Yeah.
the defensive driving, the sexual harassment training, and the ethics training.
All the training she made a big deal about 2.5 minutes ago.
Well, Josh asked the question, he just hollered it out.
So every time they're reappointed, they have to do a board member orientation training, which is kind of
Oh,
like
yeah,
a
the orientation.
refresher. And then ethics, IT security, sexual harassment, and defensive driving, almost yearly. But the licensed members on the board, they don't get a break on their continuing competency either. They have to fulfill that as well.
And acronym training. There's so many acronyms.
But once you're licensed, if you wanted to attend a board meeting, you can claim that as some of your continuing competency.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
You can earn up to 8 hours of your Con Ed requirement for each cycle by attending a board meeting.
And meetings are free to attend.
And meetings are free to attend.
Wow. Awesome.
Do you guys get that credit? The license?
He says, do the licensed members get that credit?
They get the credit if they take the time to fill out that same card. Yes.
Because that's how we know that you're here.
And it's very easy to confirm their attendance. Camera.
Especially if you get up and ask a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. But if you do choose to come to future board meetings, the board values your input because you're out there, you're, in the nitty gritty, you've got perspectives that we don't have. And so your participation is very valuable. We're 7 voices when we have a full board, but you're the other voice. So we really encourage you, invite you to come to the meetings and participate.
Yeah, with the exception of closed session, we ask for public comment after every single agenda item. So it's a great opportunity to provide your feedback and ask questions.
Strongly encourage you to come to a board meeting when you want to. Don't come when we want you here.
Yeah.
That would be a very different thing. On that note, hearings, we didn't discuss hearings a whole lot, but it's something that we do at many of our meetings. We have somebody who's been put on probation, they're seeking to have their probation terminated or shortened, or have conditions changed, and they petition for a hearing, they come before us, they present their case. We have somebody from the Attorney General's office who presents the case on behalf of the state as to why they should keep on probation or what the story was that got them on probation. So we have those things that happen. They're very intense. At our last meeting in June, we were down in Long Beach and we had 3 hearings. And so you guys can go on to the PTB website, go down to meetings or media. Either of those will take you to links to the webcasts, so the recorded versions of that meeting. On day 1 of that meeting were when the 3 hearings were. So it's educational. It's really, like I said, it's intense. There's an administrative law judge who runs the meeting. We're there listening to the presentation. We get to ask questions of the therapist or therapist assistant, and then we go to closed session and we make a decision about if we want to reduce the probation or give them back a full license so that they're no longer on probation. So it's a really interesting thing to see rather than just watching us talk about our own business, which can be boring sometimes, but it's your business.
So it's right at 3:00. Do they have to go right now?
They're out of their class at this point.
Can I ask one question before you guys leave? Well, maybe 2. So you nod the head, I'm going to go for 3. So it's kind of like a shameless plug again at Outreach, right? So as future applicants for this type of licensure, would you say that you are more familiar with, say, your driver's license than you are with the license to practice as a physical therapy assistant?
Do you know the laws of the road better than you know the laws that regulate PT?
You haven't studied for the laws of licensing yet.
I know you haven't taken the exam.
Okay.
You haven't taken the exam, but you've been in clinic, right?
They're just starting their part-time, they've been in
Oh.
clinic one Friday.
One Friday.
okay.
All right.
So
So
here's
you've had a Friday of being in clinic to be able to
And they'll be
observe.
coming back at the end of their full-time clinicals and have a week of laws and regs. So
Ah.
they haven't really been inundated with it. It's been talked about different things through different courses, but they haven't been hit hard on that.
Okay.
So here's a fair
So back to Jason's question.
Here's a fair question then, right? So have you ever taken the time to verify the license of a health practitioner that you were receiving services from?
Not that I was receiving services from, but we found out that we can do that through the website, and I looked up some of my old PTs that I worked under as an aide, and my mom, because she's a nurse.
All right.
Good.
Very good.
Anybody surgical procedures, any major health issues, hospitalized or anything like that? Ever throughout your life? Yeah, okay. Didn't verify the doctor, didn't
At the time,
verify,
I didn't know.
right? See, so then we'll flip it, right? Show of hands, anybody actually used like a website like Yelp or something to check on a restaurant or review its performance? You see my point?
The surgeon is.
Yeah, exactly. So when you guys become applicants, you'll be able to go to our website system called Breeze to apply. But Breeze is also for consumers, right? Because you used it to verify licensures. You can actually create your Breeze account now as a consumer and use it to verify other healthcare practitioners and even subscribe to those healthcare practitioners' statuses. So that if it changes, they get in trouble, they get put on probation or something, you'll get an email notification that tells you that. So it's a great idea to do it. When you become a licensed PTA, it will be really important, I think, as the administrator of the program, and I'm speaking from experience, but don't take my word for it, that you verify the license of the people that you work under their supervision. Because all you really have to have is that one physical therapist who forgot to renew their license. And everything that you and they did in the eyes of an insurance company or a third-party payer can come unwound, right? So all the services that were paid for, all the services rendered, would then be kind of asked by those insurance companies as a violation of contract to be paid back.
And then you might be before the board because you did something that wasn't in good judgment, in
Which we
good
call it.
professional judgment. So you might end up in front of us. Don't do that.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all. So any public comment for those of you of the public? And faculty, Eugene, any questions that you want to ask?
No, it's been enlightening.
Okay.
It's really a different experience from as a licensee and as a, coming from a different perspective.
Mhm. Thanks for coming today. Yeah.
And thank you for hosting us on campus. We appreciate it.
Okay, so done with agenda item number 13, which is the physical therapy student question and answer forum. We do have a presentation for board member training. And if it's okay with the board, we can move right into that. Do we need to set up?
Just a small recess for setup and for board needs. So we're going to bring down a screen. We're going to ask you to move into the audience for a presentation.
Got it. Okay.
And the board member liaison.
When'd you start?
Let's see, I started back in May, so still a newbie. We'll just put it that way when we start off. But I'm, learning a lot about this myself. And if anybody has any questions at the end or even in the middle, please ask them. If I don't know it, I'll let you know. Yeah, but we'll get back to you on that. So.
I'll also help. I'll try to help.
Yes, thank you, Kim.
I'm Kim. I've been with the board since December 2016. I'm the travel, training, and personnel liaison for the board. I also provided the board members with the pocket travel guide. I'm sure you have several now. And notes for you to take and those for you to keep for yourselves. And are you ready? Mm-hmm. We're going to start.
Yeah, so actually the first thing I'm going to do is ask you guys a question. This is who can file a claim. So these are the two types of members. Do you know which type that you are? Non-statutory? Or that's your guess?
That's my guess.
Okay.
Show your hand, non-statutory?
Yeah.
And statutory.
Yeah, so you're correct with statutory, because statutory are the ones who are appointed. Non-statutory are more of a selection. It's not appointed by a law. So statutory has something to do with law. Reimbursement allowances. There are several types of allowances here. Obviously, we do short-term. These are your. It's over 50 miles. It's less than 30 days. It's short-term travel. You get per diem expenses as well as the rest of the transportation business. It depends on which county that our lodging is taking place in. It varies widely, I should say. $90 a day down to $250 if you're in San Francisco, because it's way more expensive there. So they allow different things. Now we also do excess lodging justifications if there are extenuating circumstances that we need. If there are events or if there are other reasons that warrant us needing to get a place that's over the standard. And so that's pretty. Keep your receipts. There are some things, most things you do need a receipt for. The hotel will kick you a receipt at the conclusion. Tolls, parking, and meals you do not need a receipt for. But I would say err on the side of keeping a receipt and submitting it. If they don't need it, then there'll be no issue. If they need it, then it could be an issue. As you can see, things that you don't need one for, however, are the meals, incidentals. Incidentals is for every 24-hour period, you get a $5 incidental. That's for you. That's to cover things like tips and tolls and things of that nature. That's what it's kind of geared for. If it's under, let's see, parking fees of under $10. If you remember at the last place we were at, we had that parking fee there, and it was $9, so we didn't need a receipt. If it was $10 or over, we would have wanted a receipt from you guys for that, or they would have wanted us when we go to accounting to submit it. So that was nice that it was under 10.
So you were kind enough to put that on our reimbursement forms, but where do we list those things? Which form and where at?
You talking about the receipts?
Yeah, like for parking, like for exactly at Long Beach. Like, if we were going to be the ones to claim that, you are nice enough to do that for us, I don't know where to put that. I don't know what form to put my mileage on. I don't know.
So it's within the CalAIDers travel reimbursement program. It's a program on the computer. So I know, at least for all of you board members, I log it on there for your behalf, and I can submit these forms for you.
So also, I know the board members, they submit a form to the board relations analyst to complete for them. And you can include that in there, or you can just do an email to us and just say, hey, I parked here, it was under $10, I don't have the receipt. Just let us know the date and location and we can do the rest for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the forms that we're using, those are DCA forms, right? Those aren't PTBC forms, or are they?
They're internal, they're our forms.
They are internal.
We can change it up, we can always make adjustments to that.
I don't know what you guys think. I feel like as a board member, the more prompts that are there, the more I won't forget to include something. Because I think I sent you something, oh, by the way, I forgot to claim this and here's this as well. Like, you know, do you have a gas receipt? Or where do you want us to put our actual mileage? Because I end up just kind of writing that in. I don't know if any of you do the same.
I don't. I out of default, I just sort of do Google Maps.
Yes.
The two in the front,
and that works because when we send it to accounting, after I've logged in and made a submission on your guys' behalf, I will include a Google Maps thing just to warrant so when it goes to accounting, they'll see, okay, that's where they got that from, you know. So it'll say this many miles.
So we can change the form up to make it easier for our board members, so it's less confusing and it's prompts you guys like what to complete, and then we'll just do it on our end.
Or as a courtesy, possibly maybe we can add, like we could do it more frequently, maybe monthly, like we would do for the executive officer. We do that. It's like it's a prompt, so it's a trigger for you. If we send you the form every month, let's say you have travel that month or another board member had training that month. You know, I understand maybe you're not necessarily training every month or doing something every month, but it's that prompt, it's that trigger. If you guys are not bothered by that, we are happy to do that. We can do it once a month.
Yeah, I just want to get other board members' feedback because I don't want you to make big changes just for me. I might be the problem.
You got
You're not the problem.
I was going to say she is.
But that's a small change.
It is. It
That
is. It's very
recommendation is a
small.
small
Adding a
change.
checkbox for like, is there a gas receipt? Is there a parking receipt? Is there a toll? You
Great
know,
idea.
if you take a bus or metro. Or just reminders that like, okay, what are all the receipts I should be submitting with this travel request that are not necessarily things that I get a physical copy of, like when I use a meter or something like that, you know?
And Tim, you sent me a reminder for the Long Beach, and I said, no, I just didn't feel like being bothered with it. It's just confusing.
And I was trying to get you. You're like, I was like, you could claim mileage, you could claim, you know, that kind of stuff, and.
But see, Tanya, I think I'm similar to you sometimes where I get overwhelmed with other things. And so the reimbursement part is like the last thing on my list. So when it comes time to do it, I don't always remember everything. And I take responsibility for that. But if there could be queuing, that'd be good.
It's valuable feedback, just the idea of creating the prompts on the form to make it easier for you to fill out, done.
In the end, it makes it easier for us, so we don't have to reach out to you.
Yes.
You know, so that's making double or triple work at the end for us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a cue for us too, if we see, you know, I mean, if you've
And then we
handwritten it
don't-
in,
Yeah.
you know, I read all those things, we get
We
it.
also don't want to hold up your pay too.
That's true.
So this will
And
make it
that's-
easier.
You'll see they're kind of, like in that case, they were trying to anticipate what the claim would be, right? And so kind of reminding you, well, you have drive time that you could have claimed and mileage that you.
Yeah, he broke it all
Yeah.
down for me.
I think that I would, for myself, even print that form out and bring it to a board meeting and actually write in during my trip. You know,
The form is confusing.
Yeah, I would probably write down what I did and what bridge I crossed and what Uber I
As
took.
you're doing it?
So then when I got home, I was like, okay, go ahead and submit this, don't forget this. I mean, that might help me.
So I know of, I believe it's 2 forms. One form is the travel and reimbursement form, which is saying when I started my trip, when I finished my trip.
that one.
There's that. But then the other form is the meal and expense sheet that I have, that I get, that I actually have. And so I kind of complete that on my own, and I fill the things in as I think are what should be.
It's the TEC.
But it's the travel and travel expense claim
Travel
or
expense
whatever.
claim.
Yeah, that's the one about when I started my trip, where I landed, where I ended up at the end of the day, and then when I completed the day that I completed my trip, and the time of all of that. And I understand that it's to show when you're off the state's clock, when the state has no more liability for what you were.
Yeah,
So that form is DC policy, but I have had conversations with the executives over there, and we do have the option if we want to internalize it, as long as we have the information that they want to have for their file. So we can kind of look at those forms and maybe possibly talk about combining the information, you know, making something like a checklist, something easier for board members to use. But that is, I'm glad you brought that up, because that one is required by DCA.
So, and one of the things that I've done with some of the forms is I've converted them into a PDF and then just made them as a form. That then the fields, the boxes are there, and I just I can fill in the boxes as I go through, rather than printing it, writing it in, and then making it all so that you can be able to read my handwriting, and then trying faxing it, you know, scanning it or whatever, doing it that way. So I've taken that on myself because to me it's just easier to do it in a PDF form. I can
Creating
fill
it as a
out
form
and
is
then-
something we can do too.
Yeah.
So that may make everybody else's life easier too.
Can I make a suggestion? The meal form, there's like rare occasions where we're at meetings for more than 3 days, so those at the bottom, like 2 sections are always empty. Maybe that's where you can put like personal use of your car, mileage, total receipt, or gas receipt, like that would be a good place for us to capture all of the other expenses outside of just meals. If it's internal, and that's the one we can include with.
Yeah, I like that. And that's good. And the point hits home too, because everything we're trying to do at the board is like we're trying to go a little more, tech savvy, right? And so why not have internal processes like that? So that's a good idea. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Tim, I was just going to say that the only time I was actually challenged in trying to figure out how to fill it out was this last June.
Yeah.
Because I drove from home to the BMOT at Riverside, and then, Daniel and I went from there to Long Beach, and then Daniel took Uber to the airport. I just came home. I was like, should I have ended the BMOT thing, and when did the PTBC board meeting start? I just sort of
No, I think you did it
here.
I think you did it right.
Back home.
Because
This is where I was.
because you were representing what you actually traveled. I mean, you drove from here to there, and then from there to there, and so that would be accurate.
Okay.
Yeah. They held up mine with a question because they needed to know how I got from Riverside to Long Beach. Like, we have no explanation. What did he do? How did he, I don't have a receipt for that. And so I got to respond.
A lot of counting.
I was in the passenger seat of Dr. Dominguez's car, so you want to reimburse me for navigation services? Let's go.
And honestly, Tim, the first time I even knew I had a CalAiders account was when you said that you got kicked out. I am not going to be able to help you out with the password, my friend. I didn't know.
So a little insight into this kind of whole process, right? This is something that we as internal staff have to deal with all the time too with our travel plans. And because of outreach and the different types of travel, we have those kind of disconnected, how'd you get here, who'd you ride with, who rented the car, who got gas, all those kind of questions. While we're trying to streamline that internally, I want to use those same processes to streamline it for the board members. As an example, the fact that you don't know what CalAiders is exactly how I want it. Okay? Because it's just less work. So the portal that you were asking, like what are the forms that you need to fill out, I'm trying to save you from those forms. That's what the liaison is for.
Thank you.
And he's already exhibited instances where he's tried to anticipate costs and make that claim for you, even if you didn't know you were entitled to that claim. Right?
When I see calculators global, I'm like, oh, shit.
And that's what I'm saying is I'm still new to, a lot of the moving parts myself, and that's why when I submitted to accounting, and they even have more, pointed questions about all these different things too, that, gosh, there was like the one, for you, where you were coming and going every day, and so then there was like this taxable fringe benefit thing.
Yeah.
That one's still new to me. I thought
My
about
meals were
that.
taxable because I did an overnight, like at the hotel or something.
Yeah, that one's new to me, and I'm still learning about that.
Well, so that's the perfect example, and he kind of coined it. We are presenting these travel claims to accountants,
Yeah.
right?
What's her
And so
name, Betty?
they're very meticulous, they're very lean counting, everything has to fit a certain
It's like
category.
I didn't save at the hotel to save money, and then they're gonna tax me on my
Right.
meal reimbursements. All right, next time I'm just gonna stay at the hotel.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is.
Were there any other? Yeah.
A question about the state's requirements for original receipts. Are they requiring originals, or could we like upload receipts to you through like Certify or an app, or does everything have to be physical receipts that are mailed to you?
When I send all the paperwork to them physically, they do want the originals.
Originals.
So,
Has to be originals unless they use it.
yeah.
Can't we do like the hotel on the original receipts? Can we-
Right.
It's still considered as original.
So you get it from electronically originally, would that work?
Yes.
It should.
Yeah.
The times when I've had to do original is for a gas receipt, so filling up the rental car, which I kind of still don't understand because the rental's from the state. Why doesn't the state just have the gas covered so that I don't have to?
And then they don't want to give you the 35 cents for the debit fee.
And then the other one that I had to submit the original for is the bridge toll.
Right.
Yes.
So bridge tolls and air parking, that's $10, right? Keep that receipt and keep the physical receipt because they will reject a copy.
Then you can go back to
Yeah.
the receipts on
So gas and tolls.
Gas and tolls.
Tolls over $10.
Yeah.
No, any tolls.
Well, no, any tolls is the it's the parking that's, think of parking, so airport parking, all that kind of thing. Oh, see, she's reading here,
Yeah.
bridge and road tolls. I don't know, what is the thing on that?
You don't need receipts for tolls under 10.
No,
Under 9.
I've had to submit bridge tolls for $5 and $6 every single time.
Yeah.
Which is that advisement of like err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Because arguably Mike travels as much as any of us, and his travel claims work the same way, and he's, they're familiar with it. But if they can ask a question, they will ask a question. So have that receipt ready, but at the same time, don't be hesitant. If you lost that receipt and it's under $10, claim it, and we will work it out between accounting.
Madison and Araceli both said you have to submit gas receipts and the toll receipts, the bridge tolls, so, yeah.
I've printed fast track statements and they accepted.
But that's when you have fast track.
Yeah.
I don't own a car, so I don't have fast track.
You now, consider now that you have concierge liaison services.
But I know that
We will make that argument.
I will be printing a statement, my transit card statement that has my BART travel on it, which I know will be less, it should be less than $10, but I'm going to print that out, and that's going to get, that'll get submitted. But that's electronic, it's not a paper copy, so I'm going to send you an electronic copy of that.
But it's it's original source. You can't get a paper copy of it per se directly from BART. So
Right.
they should not argue or dispute
Right,
that.
and in the past when I've done that, that has not been an issue.
And even if they did, we would argue about it.
Not to derail it, but just a procedural question. So there was one time where a car rental, and man, I am trying to make my flight, and I did not have enough time to stop and fill up.
drive to the car rental, return the car, and get on the flight, and we'll file an exception for the guests.
Okay. Which is, I think, what happened.
Just email us and let us know what happened, and then we'll do the rest for you.
Yeah. Yeah. These things happen like all the time.
Kim will get you 25,000 bonus points.
And extra toothbrushes.
Yeah.
We don't talk.
Great.
Okay.
Sorry, Tim. Continue, don't listen to this. Very contentious.
This is kind of one of the hearts. Again, we were talking about exceptions. However, this is the primary thought. The cost of transportation while an official state business should be accomplished by using the most economical means for the state. That's in the state administrative manual. So we do our best, our most diligent to achieve that. And when there are exceptions, we go down that route. So these are often the numbers that we think about in our heads, and then when we're calculating our receipt, we're like, what? It's not covering everything by any means. But these are the numbers. So breakfast, $7, lunch, 11, dinner, 23. And that incidental, like I said, is 5. And that's I think it's every completed 24. So, I'm not sure in the situation where if you're coming and going and it's not a full day, I'm not certain about that yet. But you're saying it's a no?
You can't claim that.
Okay. Okay.
That's been full 24 hours, like.
So,
Next time I'll stay at the hotel.
That's right, you're trying to save money.
Save 2 hours of my life in traffic and this is easier. Yeah.
As long as you're 50 miles or further out.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Well,
But we can do an exception.
That's-
Yeah.
Okay, that's like UCLA, I did have.
like in your case for
Yeah, 4 or 5 was
this
under
this
control.
trip, exceptions can be made.
Noted.
Yeah.
I have a question, Tim. So, for example, as a rule of thumb for me, we're staying at the Residence Inn, it gives me breakfast. I've never put down to $7 for breakfast.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, what about your compliment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's right. That's right.
It's only $7.
That is completely up to your professional discretion.
I think with the staff, as long as they know when your trip begins and your trip ends, they're gonna go ahead and fill in those things for you. If you absolutely do not want to claim something, like if it's a hard no for you, just let them know.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna go ahead and go through that process based on when your trip began.
So like in a situation, your trip began yesterday, and so you're entitled to the breakfast charge today. They're going to do that math for you, unless it's something that you ask them not to do.
We just try to do something that's in the best of for you guys. Because we know you guys.
In the cases, it kind of changes sometimes. I mean, not all the same stuff is provided at every hotel, and sometimes there's other reasons why you went somewhere else, and you wouldn't, you obviously would claim that. So this is really where it's kind of like looking at how the sausage is made, right? But these are the defined times of when you qualify for these meals or not. So if you feel, sometimes it's like, what? I was there all day? It's like, well, you put this time for when you started, and because of that, it's like that doesn't necessarily qualify. So, obviously we're about taking the information accurately and all that kind of thing. So we'll, there have been, I think, a couple times where that's been a little bit of a confusing thing, and so this is kind of where that's justified, or where they base it off. Yeah.
So can we get like an example of when a trip would begin and when a trip ends? Like when would my trip end? When I'm getting on the plane? When I'm driving up to my home? When does my trip end?
Would end that when you are arriving home. You're still out and about because of that same travel thing. So, for us, it's a little different when we are leaving the office, because on a normal business day, we'd be going to the office. But in cases tomorrow night, when we're driving back home, I imagine, that we would log that time too, so.
When you walk in your door.
Yeah, because it's likely a different time, different situation, so.
Yeah, as members, it's a little bit less complicated for you. When you arrive home, the time you record is the ending of your trip, and you're entitled to, as an example, from here down to the airport, from the airport to your house, that mileage is also something that you're entitled to as well.
And how about on the other end of that, Kim, when is it, so for those of us that flew or that fly to the meetings up here in NorCal, when does the trip start? I usually put like my flight time.
No, you can put when you leave the house. Yeah.
When you left your home or your place of business to head to the airport.
Yeah.
Wherever you started to leave.
So like at 5 o'clock if I'm leaving.
You started.
That's right.
State's liability for you
That's right.
starts then.
That's right. Yeah, these are the cases where incidentals, that's where the concept of the incidental is justified in these sorts of things. It might just seem arbitrary that it's $5, but but they chose that number, and that's what that's geared towards.
Do we know when those numbers were established?
They're constantly reevaluated every year, and so that we've seen the meal numbers change over time. The incidental changes have been in effect for a long time.
Could be.
Yeah, since 2015.
What, 7/11/23 has been since 2015?
That one I think is a little newer.
Meals?
Meals was updated.
No, that was just for incidental. That was for incidental.
No, but.
Well, we don't have a reference here on this one.
Yeah.
We can get that to you though.
I don't, because I believe those numbers have been in place since I started in 14, since my appointment.
The only one that's changed is the mileage.
Oh, that's right.
That much changed in 20 years.
January of this year, am I wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, so transportation includes these kinds of things. So, whether you're taking the lift, whether you're driving your personal vehicle, or you've got a rental car, all those kind of things, that's all under the umbrella of transportation that you can get reimbursed for. Oh, so this is just kind of to let you know, since we'll be handling a lot of the itinerary for you in Concur, scheduling the airline and all that kind of stuff. There are contracted airlines that the state's contracted with, so not every airline. So obviously, you're probably very familiar with Southwest. That is one of the main ones, preferred even. But there are others, and so, but we'll just check with that.
And Concur also does not show all the flights that are available, like through Southwest's website, so they're pretty limited sometimes, what Concur gives us. But we also,
Right, through contract?
yeah, through contract. What we did find out is if there's a flight that is not available on Concur and it's cheaper through Southwest, we can book that. But if it's more, then we can't do that on the Southwest website, correct?
Which is congruent with that initial statement where they've said they just want all of the travel to be done as efficiently and low cost as possible. So if it's a difference between cost and time or convenience of time when you leave, it's going to defer to the cost.
If it's, sorry.
Yeah.
If it's cheaper and, but it's not refundable, non-refundable, could I book it?
Right, good question. What we like to do is we get the anytime,
Want to get away.
or is it want to get away?
Both, anytime and want to get away.
It's the ones that you can alter the schedule if need be, because there's just been a number of times where we've had to, and if you had to and you didn't get the one where you can go ahead and be free to change it, it would end up being a lot more in the long run. So we just err on those ones. So
there's a caveat to that. If you happen to travel enough on Southwest and staff have your membership number for Southwest to collect miles, you may qualify for Business Select that still is Want to Get Away Air anyway. I've had an experience where I saw a fellow colleague that we were on the same flight, it was Business Select, and I had to figure out why, because I was following the rules of not getting Business Select ever, and they obviously had enough miles to get Business Select. So it just speaks to the importance of having your traveler number on file with staff.
Which I have at least a couple of you on there, so if you do it, I can get it on there, it's really easy. Yes, we talked about parking a little bit, but I will say again, if there are extenuating circumstances, if anybody had a handicap of any kind, if there's reasoning to park in another section, maybe that's closer, that I can do an exception for, and they're good with that. So, but yeah.
Switching. So frequent flyer programs, I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of this, but if you do earn any travel points while on business, you can use them for personal. And I don't know who would not use them for personal, but now you can.
But you should not use them for business.
No, because you get reimbursed, so don't use it. State-owned, privately owned, and commercially owned rental vehicle use. So state vehicle, privately owned vehicle is if you use your car for business use. And then those are like the do nots, so don't use a state vehicle, like rental cars, for example, for anything other than conducting your state business. Do not carry non-state employees, your friends or relatives in the car. And don't use the state vehicle for private use. Car rental reservation information.
I even want to make a note on that last bit. There was a time where I was in another agency, and I took for a work trip, went down, and then I decided to stay an extra day, and my wife came down. And the right way of doing it is to have that clear delineation between when you're there for state business and then when you're there for
personal.
Your own personal reasons.
So you have to return a car.
Return the car and then
go
rent
reserve
it out
it
again. Rent another one if you
use.
need one. It's a pain, but what it does is it keeps everything above board, and then no one could say, hey, you're using state resources or pricing or whatever for personal benefit, and that's way to stay on the government.
And then also renting a car, we will reserve through Concur, and we always should reserve through Concur for your guys' rental car. And when go picking up your car, you need to bring your driver license, make sure it's valid, and a second form of ID. It would be your guys' PTPC badge that you guys have, or your itinerary that Tim will send you guys, or a business card.
Are there rental car points?
There are. Yes.
And they work similar to the
Pretty similar.
mileage
Yep.
for airlines?
If we don't have that and you have it given to us, just email us and we'll add it to your profile. Then it'll automatically. And I think there's other perks to it too, like you don't have to wait in line at some of the rental car places. It saves you some time. And then I know like a few of you guys seen this vehicle justification form for the first time. And this is what it looks like. And we would do that. You guys would not fill that out. We'll do that for you. And I know the most recent one was the refueling. And if you do not have time to refuel, just email us and let us know so we can fill that form out for you guys. And another thing could be like if you need to run a bigger car, sometimes you have more equipment, or if you have a medical issue that you need a bigger car. And I think
So Kim, but you guys fill that form?
We do.
Not us?
Yeah, we do.
We do all that for you guys. But if you know that you guys are running late or you turn the car in late and like the next day, just email us and we'll do that for you guys. Just don't worry about that form. So this is just a reminder, just refueling your car, you always should refuel your car and not have Enterprise do it for you, but if you, like I said, don't have time or you can't, you can just fill out the justification form.
Or just let us know and we'll fill it out, like she was just like, we'll fill that out.
And your rates are unlimited miles, and there's also insurance on your rental car too. So you don't have to pay out of
I
pocket.
was never told that I needed to refuel my car. Maybe I was and I just didn't do it. I don't know. But now I know.
Yeah.
It's 373 by local.
Is that, you have to take the car back the way you got it?
Yep.
So if it's at a quarter of a tank, I take it back a quarter of a tank. If it's empty, I take it back.
Exactly. And then these are the do nots of rental cars. Like do not extend the rental car for personal use, like we kind of touched bases on a little bit. Do not purchase insurance because it'll be out of your pocket. The state already pays for your insurance. And it says agree to purchase the fuel services. But exceptions, like we just heard.
But don't do it if they offer it to you in advance.
Yeah, do not.
Yeah, the pre-fueling thing or whatever.
And do not purchase a higher rate because we already have the state contracted rate. And do not carry non-state persons in your car. And private vehicle authorization and use. So I'm sure you guys fill out, it's every year you guys have that form, it's authorization to use privately owned vehicles. You sign it and you make sure your license is correct, or if it's expired, you fill out the form again. And it just ensures that you drive your car, your private car, for like business travels. You have insurance and your driver license is valid.
So do I need to fill out another one? That's with my license expired on my birthday. So I have a new one now.
Yep, so Tim will reach out to the board members. And this is what the form will look like. And we will email you to let you know.
Yeah, it's just normal maintenance of the file.
Yeah.
Sign something like that at the last meeting, I almost want to say.
Yep.
You're saying
Oh,
it expired
I
in
did.
2? I want to say it, but we'll
You
double
guys have
check
me
it.
trying so good.
We'll double check though.
And then the mileage rate, it did just change. DSA did not tell us it changed, and we found out on our own. So now it's up 58 cents per mile. And in the Pocket Travel Guide, they didn't provide us the most recent one, so we just did a little sticky tab note in there, so you know the updated rate. And then just touches a little bit on airport drop-off. If anyone drops you off at the airport, they get mileage both ways, so there and back. Kat, you're like missing out.
You've been here for 7 years.
How do you claim that?
You just let us know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us you got dropped off and we'll
Yeah.
do the Google
Yeah, exactly.
Maps or whatever.
Yeah,
And
my
if it's-
husband does that.
It's from
Even
home
Stockton.
and then we'll go
Is that
times 2.
retroactive?
I know.
Retroactive.
7 years of people dropping
Yeah, right.
around.
And then also if you are driving to the airport, you can claim mileage for that. And if you have someone picking you up and they have to park, they can get the parking reimbursement back, but it has to be like for a reason. Let's say your luggages are too large. Yes.
I have a question, sorry. So, as a board member, so pretend I'm a board member, and I'm driving my personal car to the airport, and then going off and then coming back. Would the PTV staff know, by knowing when my trip begins and when it ends, that they would be using that, they would be reimbursed that mileage for the drive to the airport? I'm using personal car.
As long as we know.
I claim it.
I never did. I believe my car at the airport.
You're paying for parking too.
You're missing out too?
No,
Yeah.
I do, it's like $10 a day.
Yeah.
That I submit, but the mileage stuff?
The mileage too.
Yeah.
So we know
Might as
you're in
well.
a personal car, just know that
Might as
we
well.
should be catching that, and we will. We should be catching this. $10 a
$10 a day.
Which you don't need a receipt for, right? anything?
Over, yeah.
Yeah, over
Is it 10 or above, or just over 10?
Over 10 per day or over 10 total?
Per day.
Per receipt.
Per receipt?
Per
I was gonna
receipt.
say, the receipt
Because if they
contains
have.
the
Yeah,
whole trip.
multiple days.
Like a $30 receipt.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so
Yeah.
you would submit that receipt.
Because like, let's say there's 2 different parking lots that they're going to.
Oh, sure.
Right?
But it's that mileage, using your personal car, that's your trip. You're leaving wherever you're leaving from to go to do state business, you're getting in your personal car, you're going to the airport.
Yeah.
You're going back when you come back.
USC to the
That's travel.
airport.
It's travel
Mileage.
status.
Home to the airport, mileage.
But if you get one, if you park for like 2 days, you got one receipt for those 2 days, you still get $10 per day, right?
Except if your receipt is $15. If your receipt is only $15.
Oh, yes, no one under.
If I wanted to park in a closer parking, would I still be able to get reimbursed and just eat the difference myself at the airport?
If you have a valid reason.
I don't want to walk a mile.
Yeah, so if, let's say you want to park and it's $18.
That's right, yes.
You don't need a receipt to claim parking for 10.
Yep.
Right.
So the other 8 would be on you. Or if you had a reason for, you know,
A larger
you're gonna miss your
luggage.
flight, or you have a disability of some kind, or equipment, or something that necessitates you having to park in that other parking lot, we can file an exception for the balance.
Okay, that's probably a case-by-case basis, but there was one instance where I got in late and I had to walk really far, all the way to the last, and it was nighttime, and I'd rather pay the difference than park there.
If it's because you're running late, that's, we can just do a justification form for that and submit that. That's a
And-
safety issue.
Yeah, no, safety issue, yeah, that'd be, I feel like that'd be a cinch to say, hey, there was an element of darkness and all this kind of thing that made me feel unsafe, and.
We'll submit it.
Yeah, we'll submit it.
You know what, I Uber to the airport and back a lot. And just submit your Uber receipt, you're done.
So if you do get in an accident while on state business, please contact your board relations liaison right away, and we will complete the vehicle accident report form for you all. Just let us know ASAP. Don't wait, just call us. Doesn't matter on the time of day, if you're on state business, just call us.
So that means I would call Jason.
You can call me.
I would, because I don't know who else to call. If I call the board, I might not get them, right? So I'm gonna call him, because that's who I know I'm gonna get a hold of.
And that's perfectly fine. We will get you the liaison's contact information though, so you have the direct line. But even in that situation, I kind of would prefer that you contact me if you get in a car accident in a state vehicle.
Yeah.
And if he's tied up and he can't answer, text me, call me.
Thank you, Liz. It
Does
may
that
be
go
one of you.
does that go for like any accident, like if we were trying to beat up a printer and we fall and break our
That's never worked out well.
With a sledgehammer?
Tax.
What'd she say?
When you do take a taxi or a shuttle, you can get reimbursed just as long as you have your receipt if it's over $10. Under 10, you don't need to submit your receipt. And if you do include tips, you will not get reimbursed because that's part of your incidentals that you get daily. And then you guys are also able to take a Lyft and Uber, but the state still does not allow Zip cars. It may change, but for now, they're not letting us do that.
Or gig car, which is kind of a newer version of Zip car.
And then for your parking and tolls, day parking or overnight parking, just as long as you're on state travel status. And again, if it's 10 or less, just let us know. You don't need a receipt for that. And then supervisor's responsibility, in this case, it would be the board president, Alicia, just to ensure that the method that we choose for travel is the best interest for the state, not for the travel person that's going on travel. And then for approval, the board president Alicia will approve all of the board members and Jason's. And if Alicia's not available, then the vice president.
To be determined.
Yeah. And then Deputy Director Christopher Castrillo is going to be approving the board president. And in his absence, Karen Nelson will be approving yours. And, oh, what happened? Any questions?
You answered all of it.
Yeah, I think the only issue would be like, you know, choosing what's the mode of travel that's best for the state when someone who lives in areas like Dr. Dominguez and myself have the option of traveling the opposite way. Like if you're coming upstate or I'm going downstate, sometimes it takes longer to fly than to drive. You know? So, I mean, yeah.
No, I was just, initially, I thought I was saving the money, or saving the state money. So I told Jackie, no, we'll go ahead and drive out. And then I realized I could be flying, like, really? For less? Yeah. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I'll get on that.
No, but there's an argument to be made in either direction, right? So if you're struggling with driving or flying and you prefer in this instance to be driving, but you think you can get, there's other things to consider in that argument, and we're going to help you out in trying to figure out the best mode of transportation. There may be some times where we have to say, just because it's so overwhelmingly on the fly side, that we can't, we're unsuccessful. We weren't able to get you a drive situation, but we try.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you so much.
doing all the forms and filling things out for us. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, that's how Tim
Gentle
learned.
reminder.
Thank you.
Tim learned that way, right?
I'm getting there again, so that's.
It's the best way for us to learn also.
Like any kind of things that we do for the state, the forms change, the rates change. This is all an ongoing process, so the learning never really stops. The policies change. You heard in this presentation, the mileage changed and there wasn't any kind of notification. We just stumbled across it. So it's much easier for us to kind of keep a centralized knowledge with the liaison about that stuff and then have them assist you very similar to like a travel agent than to try and have you guys log into the CalAIR's global portal and manage it yourself.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim and Kim.
Breaking back just to.
We still are live here, and it looks like we've gotten through all of the agenda items for day one, and we're going to revisit agenda item number 10, which is discussion and possible board action for the increase in the exempt level of the executive officer tomorrow. So the time is 4:07, and we will recess until tomorrow morning,
9 a.m.
9 a.m.